To order the planning board meeting for August 18th, 2020. My name is Carrie Martinek. I'm the chair of the planning board meeting. I'd like to read some information before we get started here. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda, by tuning into cable access television government channels, Verizon Channel 30 or Charter Channel 192, or by visiting the town's website and going to the Department of Cable Access Television and click What's Playing Live. Please note, if you're on your phone, you will need to dial *9 to raise your hand. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. So now I'd like to confirm that board members and persons anticipated on the agenda are remotely present and can be heard by stating the following. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So let's see, Anthony Zaitin.
Here.
Millie Milton.
Here.
Amy Pratsky.
Here.
Michelle Gillespie.
Here.
Okay, great. And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob Federico.
Here.
Kathy Joubert.
Here.
And Fred Litchfield.
Here.
Great. Okay, so let's see. Once we have our anticipated speakers come through as panelists, we will also make sure that they can hear okay, and we can hear them. Ground rules for the meeting. I'll invite each speaker on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full names and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phones or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the board or committee, will be conducted by roll call vote. Let's see. We do have public comment, as I mentioned. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comments as follows. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, the chair will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Let's see, we do not have executive session this evening. If technical difficulties arise, the chair will suspend the meeting while attempts to resolve are made. Any disconnections or reconnections of board members should be accurately reflected in the minutes. Okay, that concludes my announcement for tonight's meeting. First on the agenda for this evening, we have the continued public hearing for 0 Bartlett Street, special permit for groundwater protection overlay district bylaw and special permit site plan approval. So with that, I'm going to invite the representatives from 0 Bartlett. So let's see, I see Israel here. Oops. There we go. And oh, David, you must be allowing people on because I didn't press anything and Israel was able to come. Dave Robinson. Oops. Let's see, Rob Najee. There you are. Okay. And I have Mark Donahue. Oops, there he is. Okay, so let's see. I should have Israel. I'm sorry, yes?
Carrie, I'm sorry to interrupt. You want to bring these in as panelists? You want to promote them to panelists?
I did, yeah. So they're not accurately promoted?
It appears that no, that they're just they have the ability to speak. So bear with me just a moment. I'll do that.
Okay. So what you're doing will give them the ability to present.
Yeah. In addition, I'm sorry, can you Who is it we're bringing in again, please? We got Israel. Who else?
Yeah, I have Israel. I have Mark Donahue, Dave Robinson, and Robert Nagy.
Okay, that should do it.
Okay, great. So I want to confirm that the speakers here we can hear you and you can hear us. Israel, can you just state that confirm whether or not we can, just by affirmation, that you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear everyone.
Okay, great. And Dave Robinson?
I can hear you.
Okay, Mark Donahue?
Yes, I can.
Yep. Okay, we lost Rob? Did we lose Rob?
I'm here.
Nope.
I might be
Here.
off the page.
Oh, okay. I don't see Rob. Oh, there you are. Yep,
I see him.
okay. There we go. Okay, great. So let's get started here. I think we continued the hearing from last time, and since then we received a few different communications. What I'd like to do, actually, since we have some new people on the call, is I want to kind of reset us here for a few different things that are relevant to this application. So first, Mark, I welcome. You're new to the process here, so welcome. I received your letter.
It's been a long time since
Yesterday,
I've been referred to as new, so thank you.
Okay. Well, anyway, I received your letter and thank you for that. I did want to take the time, though, to point out a couple of notes that I made about the letter. Certainly, I thought you had some good points in here, but I did want to clarify a few things and then perhaps have all of us kind of take a look together and reset on something in terms of this application. The items that I wanted to address before we get started here is the first component of the letter that I believe, is this letter online now, Kathy? So for anyone else who wants to see it. So this letter should be posted on the website as well, on the town website under materials for the meeting tonight. Regarding timing. So the thing I wanted to say about timing is that during this time, we're obviously in a pandemic. We were stuck without the ability to hold a public hearing for 3 months. Town Hall just recently came back online for appointments last week. There's even chatter going on right now about whether or not these public hearings will prove to be adequate for public access, which I think the courts will finally won't be looking at till next year. So there's certainly been an unanticipated environment for which we've been trying to adjust and do the best that we can. But in addition to that, in terms of just any sort of timing concerns, this application was submitted in December, and it was submitted with some incorrect special permit was missing, so it had to be resubmitted. We actually opened the hearing on January 21st. The applicant requested the hearing be continued to February 18th. The planning board agreed. On February 18th, you requested, or not you personally, the applicant requested the hearing be continued to March 17th. The planning board agreed. At that time, you'll notice the timeline from what I just read that we already had executive orders from the governor that basically shut us down without the ability to have public hearings. So in regards to any concerns about timing, you know, I don't really want the board to be pressured into making a decision tonight because the expectation is this was submitted in December. This environment is not what any of us are used to, and we're all just really trying to accommodate and make smart, intelligent decisions on the right timeline. The other thing I wanted to address from this letter is, and this has happened before in other applications, so I think it's important to note, this notion of some sort of approval from advisory committees. Specifically listed in this letter was Northborough Design Review Board, which is a committee actually, and the Groundwater Advisory Committee recommended approval. So our advisory committees, as I'm sure many know, actually don't really approve anything. They advise the planning board on specific areas of an application. In the case of groundwater, I want to make it clear that that board, that committee is comprised of different members, not necessarily with groundwater expertise. So I very smart people on the boards. I appreciate anyone stepping up and doing it. But, you know, we're looking at, you know, software engineers and lawyers and network administrators, right? They're not really groundwater experts. So when we talk about a groundwater advisory committee unanimously voting, I think we need to consider that's not a board of groundwater experts. That's, if we had 5 Freds on that board, I think that would be great, but we don't. We just have 1 Fred, and we have people volunteering to, you know, make the smartest decisions they can, but lacking groundwater expertise. I just wanted to make that clear. It comes up a couple different times. The other thing I just wanted to speak to is just in terms of the information that the planning board can request. If you take a look at our site, the site plan review, planning board rules and regulations, there's a list there of the things that we're able to request or that are actually part of a site plan submission. And it's quite extensive, actually. There's a development impact analysis. It includes traffic, environmental, fiscal, community. And the bylaw doesn't actually limit the scope of information that we can request, say, as part of a traffic report or anything like that. So I think whether we're talking about special permits or site plans, I don't know if it was intended to insinuate we couldn't be asking for things, but I just wanted to make that clear that everything that we're looking at is certainly supported by the site plan review rules and regulations, which anyone's welcome to look at. Regardless, the one thing I wanted to do while we're talking about this is the special permits. So in terms of the special permits here, I want to make sure, because there was an initial mix-up in the application, that we're all looking at the same special permits for this application. And the 3 permits that I have, and they're referenced in this letter that there are 3, but I think we only speak to 2 in this letter, is a special permit for site plan approval, and that's section 73050A2. So for anybody who has a copy of the bylaws or wants to follow along, that section is for the special permit with site plan approval, in which the decision criteria is in 73040, which if you flip over to is the special permit criteria 1 through 7. So that's there. And then we have a special permit to extend the industrial use for groundwater 1. That's 707-010C3. And then we have a special permit for the groundwater 3 overlay. And that is 707-010D, 3C4. And actually, I think in this letter, it may have transposed those numbers. So I don't know if you do want to correct that, but there's one section that just references a section of the bylaws that does not exist. I think that was just transposing letters. But in any case, those are the 3 permits that I have in the application I'm looking at. So before we get started, I want to confirm that we're all looking at the same application. We're all looking at the same special permits, and we're all, you know, following along to the criteria that we're supposed to apply, so that there's no confusion or feelings that, you know, criteria-wise, what we should be looking at. So in that case, I want to ask the applicant, are you under a different impression that you have a different number of special permits as part of this application?
No, there's 2 special permits and there's site plan approval.
So I actually have this as a site plan. I have it as a special permit with site plan approval.
We received guidance from both the town planner and the town engineer at the time that we initially submitted the special permits, indicating which special permits we should be filing for. And those are the special permits that are reflected on the site plan application.
Okay, so that was when we first had the correction. So I think it was the message given to from the staff was the applicant has applied for site plan approval, but should have applied for a special permit for site plan approval under section 703-050A2, as this project also requires the above referenced special permit, which automatically requires a site plan special permit. Section 7.2 of the Planning Board Rules and Regulations includes submission requirements, etc. And the response from the applicant was the applicant has resubmitted for a special permit under section 703-050A2, special permit for site plan approval. So this is what I'm looking at, and I want to make sure if anybody's looking at something different, we settle this right now.
Yeah, I mean, is there a discrepancy, or I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Is there a discrepancy between what the guidance that we received from the town staff and what we actually filed?
There's no discrepancy for me, but this letter seems to imply a discrepancy that I'm not aware of. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. It implies that we're only to look at groundwater special permits, and that should be our only focus when I have a special permit site plan review on my table. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Do we agree?
So.
Okay. Okay, great. So the other piece of information we received was an updated traffic report. So I don't know, unless the applicant wants to present something else, if maybe Rob, I know you recognize that it wasn't received until yesterday afternoon, so I think there's a lot to get through. I don't know if you're prepared to maybe talk us through a little bit or show anything tonight.
Well, Rob, before you jump in there, I'd like to give Mark an opportunity to share some thoughts about, what our understanding is to date of the application that we filed.
That's what we just did, and we just agreed that you're applying for a special site plan special permit and then 2 groundwater special permits, and we just agreed that we're all looking at the same application. Is there something that, are we looking at a different application or no?
Well, I think if I might, and for the purposes of this hearing and the use of everybody's time, it's to some extent a difference without a distinction. There are 2 groundwater permits that are required to perform the work as required. There is a site plan that is required given the magnitude of the project. I don't, with all due respect, don't think that the best use of the time to present the information so that the board has it in front of them to be able to make a determination is to go around as to whether it's site plan special permit, since the underlying use is but permitted use, but for the groundwater protection, or it's simply site plan approval.
Oh, okay. So you don't agree. You think it is just a site plan. Your application states otherwise. So that's what I'm trying to clarify here. Your application says special permit for site plan approval. This is what the town staff advised you to submit your application as. You resubmitted it. You originally submitted a site plan. You resubmitted it with a special permit. So I need to understand. So maybe Kathy, or whoever advised them to do the site plan and special permit and indicated that this is what was said. The applicant has applied for site plan approval, but should have applied for a special permit for site plan approval under section 7-03-050A2, as this project also requires the above referenced special permit, which automatically requires a site plan special permit. So we need to know what's going on. Is this a site plan? Do you have an application here for a special permit for site plan approval?
I'm not clear on who you're directing the question to. I heard you begin I heard you begin the litany by addressing Kathy, so I'm not sure whether you're addressing her or.
Oh, right, yeah. So I guess I'd want to hear from town staff. Why were they advised to do this?
Well, I can speak to that. Originally, sure. The application came in December as site plan approval and also special permit for groundwater. And then we corresponded with the applicant that anytime a special permit the way the bylaw is written, is anytime a special permit, most often for groundwater, but anytime a special permit is required, the site plan approval becomes part of the special permit process. So the section of the zoning, and I can cite that, I don't have that open right now, but talks about that if a special permit is required, then also a special permit for the site plan approval. And then that the applicant then submitted on February 25th a revised distribution sheet and with some revised material that it's for a special permit with site plan approval and then special permit for the groundwater overlay district.
Okay, thank you. So that further clarifies that this application, what's on this application is correct. And that's what we're looking at here tonight. A special permit for site plan approval, special permit groundwater 1, special permit groundwater 3.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So would you, Israel, does that speak to anything that you wanted to clarify?
Yeah, I think it's accurate. I think it's also, the application should be consistent with the prior applications that we've filed for the adjacent parcels, which are also part of groundwater overlay 1, but for the requirement for the second special permit in order to extend groundwater overlay, 3 into overlay 1.
Right, 3.
So I think the distinction would have been to add another check to the box to add the second special permit. And what we submitted originally in terms of the special permit filing application was consistent with the prior 2 applications.
What you filed originally?
When we made the initial filing in December, that then needed to be corrected. The reason that correction needed to come about is because unlike the previous filings that didn't extend into groundwater 1, this one did. And so at the suggestion of the town engineer, we added the additional second special permit to extend into groundwater 1. Otherwise, the applications should have been the same in terms of what the filing was.
So I actually took the time to go back and look at 301, which is the last one we did in 2018. And the special permit with site plan review is a consistent application across both applications. The one originally filed was not a consistent application of that. So I don't know, maybe we can look at it at some point if you want and talk about it. To Mark's point, we don't have to waste time here.
Okay.
But what we have before us is a consistent application of the bylaws. I don't know why it wouldn't be.
Okay.
Okay, great. So Rob, I'm sorry, Ron or Rob? Rob, do you want to talk to any of the new traffic update information that you have?
I can do that, certainly. So what we did was we submitted and we recognized it came in yesterday and the board may not have had a chance to review it. It is essentially the same memo that we submitted back with the original application. And what I did was I highlighted any changes in the document in italics and underlined words so that people could see where the differences were. The changes are essentially that we added a couple of developments that were not previously included as background projects in the traffic study. I talked with Fred Litchfield a little while ago. We confirmed the square footages of the buildings and the uses that were included in there. So those 4 buildings have been added into that, and that includes 301 Bartlett Street, 1 Lyman Street, the 370 Bartlett Street, I believe it is, which is the one that's shared with the driveway that's shared with the current FedEx facility. And then parcel G, which is off of Hayes Memorial Drive. Those 4 projects were added as background projects is already being either permitted, built, and not occupied, or in the process of being constructed. So what we did with that was we added the traffic and distributed it on the area networks. the roadway network to see if it made any substantial changes to the sort of background traffic conditions prior to our project being constructed. And then what we did was we added the traffic impacts associated with our project on top of that to try to give an idea of how traffic will be impacted by our projects, taking into account all the other projects that were out there. And the findings don't necessarily change from our original statements. Our project here, which again, it's important to point out to everybody who's watching at home as well as the board members, this is a warehouse development. It's not a cross-dock facility that's generating a lot of truck traffic. The FedEx facility and the Dewey Pile facilities out there are certainly generating a significant amount of heavy vehicles, trucks, if you will. This is a warehouse development, and it's expected to only generate about 5 to 10, trucks per day, and those could be single unit trucks, those could be larger trucks, because of its use. It's a warehouse. It's not a shipping facility. So with that, our project is only going to generate less than about 45 trips an hour during the morning and evening peak rush hours, the majority of those being passenger vehicles. Now, we did hear at the last meeting some concerns from residents, certainly down Bartlett Street as you get towards the school, about the impacts of tractor trailer trucks and heavy vehicles heading in that direction, and the concern that may raise both from a nuisance perspective as well as a safety perspective. So what we've done is I've talked to Israel, the applicant, and we've agreed to put a condition in there similar to what the Dewey Pile project did, and that would have tractor trailer, any commercial vehicles, frankly, turning left out of the site. So it would be directed towards, say, Marlboro, the 495 interchange, exit 23C, and not turn right out of the facility, which would bring it down into, down Bartlett Street towards the school and towards that neighborhood. I thought that would be that's a good, solution to some of the concerns that we did hear at the last hearing. That can be done through signage and enforcement, and it's something that we are confident that the driveway, given the volumes that we're talking about out here, can easily handle in its operations out there from a safety perspective as well as from a efficiency perspective, if you will. So those are the substantive changes to the traffic memo. We just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to take a look at that and just hit the highlights of the changes that were associated. So that's the.
Could you actually show us? You mentioned that there are certain things highlighted which spotlight some of the updates with, filling in the warehouses that are actually there. Is there anything you can speak to with notable changes, or maybe your methodology in how you looked at those? Obviously a lot of them don't have tenants, or Bob, I know you mentioned last time that some are underway, so that may not be the case for long, but could you walk through the methodology there and maybe show us how those additions changed or impacted what we had looked at before?
I could try to show you that. Let me.
So the reason I ask is I see you highlighted them, but I need you to put it into context. Like, what does that, I see that they're new, but what did that mean?
So let me, maybe it'd be easier if I just walk you through it in voice instead of trying to get into the appendix of the actual report itself. So what we do is we look at each of the individual developments and the square footages associated with them. Some of them actually had traffic studies that were done for them. Others did not, and still move forward. So, for example, the 1 Lyman Street project, which is 17,000 square feet of warehouse and 3,000 square feet of office space. What we did with that is we actually just looked at the empirical traffic numbers that are given to us by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is an organization that looks at different land uses throughout the area and tries to normalize how traffic is generated at each of those, and tries to quantify what those numbers are. So, for example, 1 Lyman, which is 17,000 square feet of warehouse, 3,000 square feet of office space, would generate anywhere in the range of 15 to 25 new morning and evening peak hour trips. So we take those trips and we distribute them onto the roadway network. The parcel G, which is the Hayes Memorial project, again, it's if you're on my traffic study, Table 3 summarizes what the developments are, but parcel G is 167,000 square feet of warehouse space, not too, just a little bit slightly bigger than the one that we're proposing here. That project is expected to generate anywhere from 50 to 55 new peak hour trips. And again, most of that is likely to be headed towards the regional roadway network and not double back towards this area. So what we do is we assign traffic based on where it's going today. 301 Bartlett, which is obviously next door to this project, expected to generate somewhere between 60 and 70 new peak hour trips. Again, some of that traffic is going away from the downtown area, some of it's going towards it. And then 370 Bartlett, which is two separate 300,000 square foot warehouses, again, not associated with our project, but they're there. Those projects, that project would generate anywhere between 90 and 100 new peak hour trips onto the area roadway, given the land use of a warehouse. So again, we take that information, we put it onto the roadway, add it in, and add those trips to the network, and then put it into our traffic model, which calculates delay for drivers and identifies it, then ranks every intersection essentially on a letter grade A through F. A being free flow, nobody has to stop for anybody, you can just drive through it. F meaning you have to wait a little bit to get into the traffic flow out there. So again, as you look at the impacts of those projects, which are already approved and out there on the roadway, we look at them, we identify what the traffic impacts are going to be without our project in place. That's with, if you were to deny this project, that traffic would still be there regardless. And then what we do is we add our 45 trips on top of that to try to see if there's any tangible substantive added delay that's going to be caused by our project onto the roadways. And if you go to the, again, if you go to the table 6, which in our traffic memo highlights the different delays that will be experienced with each of the projects. What we've identified is that there is no change from existing or what would ultimately be future traffic operations with or without our project in place. So any intersection that operates well today will continue to work well. Any intersection, for example, like Cedar Hill and not Cedar Hill, but Bartlett and Lyman Street, which operates with a little bit of delay on the Lyman Street approach, is going to continue to operate, poorly. And I think one of the changes that I think we've suggested here is to try to direct traffic away from that by having it turn left out of the driveway will only benefit, and help that intersection in the overall operations out here. So again, if you go to table 6, you'd see the quantified difference between what would be there with our project and without our project, and you'll note that there's virtually no difference in any of the operations out there with or without the project.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to present? Any additional information you wanted to present this evening?
I'm all set with the traffic stuff, unless there's any questions. I'll look to Israel if there's any others.
If I might, Madam Chair, there were no requests for additional information at your last meeting to the applicant, but for the traffic items. And so we didn't prepare any additional information with regard to that. And we're glad to try to respond to that. The purpose of the letter was to try to clarify and hopefully assist the board in the focus of the discussion and the direction of the discussion with other parties that are interested, so that it is focusing on the criteria that the board has to determine for this. And I'm glad to continue to talk about the decision criteria if the board's so inclined, or we can do it during the course of it to just try to stay on course for what's involved.
Okay, great. I think I did have a couple items from last time that I thought I requested, but maybe I didn't channel it in the right way. But I'm going to actually open up for the board to ask any questions at this point from anything that, we last time. So just to refresh, last time we had a very lengthy discussion and we had a vast amount of public comment to get through, and we were on a very tight timeline just in terms of our ability to stay online And I wanted to make sure we got through public comment. So the board got a little bit cut off last time. So I want to give you the opportunity to, if you have questions that, whether it's from the last meeting you didn't get to ask or that's come to light from the traffic, whatever the case, just open it up to the board. If anyone wants to ask questions or make comments. Millie, we'll start with you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I did have some questions about the traffic, about having the traffic turn left going out towards Marlboro. I think does make a lot of sense, but doesn't it also make sense to have most of the traffic and informing the drivers that are coming in to also come from the Marlboro side? Because I noticed on some of the other approvals that they include that in their conditions, that drivers and commercial deliveries and traffic will come also from the Marlboro side. So this one just says will be directed to turn left out, but other ones do say to also arrive from that direction to reduce the residential impact.
I think the intent is for commercial traffic to come and go from
Okay.
that direction as well. So good catch.
That was it for me.
Okay. Michelle, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. Anthony?
So just to get back to traffic too, and it's not clear to me the enforceability that we might have in terms of direction of that traffic. Either way, and I think it would be awfully difficult to regulate what was incoming, but I'd sure like to see what we could regulate on outcoming, and I'd like to see what enforceability we have in terms of actually making and mandating that to happen. It's still, I'm a little concerned about groundwater. I do feel as though I'd like, even a third party or a peer review of the groundwater and drainage. Environmental impact I'm concerned about, and then probably along with that, if it were me, I'd like to see a peer review on that. And then we still don't know what the tenants are, so which I think could greatly vary the traffic and impact on environment. So that's about all I had.
Okay, Amy, do you have questions? Can you hear me, Amy?
So I just have a couple. I like all of what Anthony just said, but I still had a concern from hearing from the fire chief. I think I've mentioned a couple times that I'd like a new memo from the fire chief because the old one was written before the site plan was updated. But I also would like in writing something from the fire chief that it's okay that you can't access all sides of the building. I know we've been told that if he doesn't reply, then he's okay with it. But I'd like something in writing, or at least have him on our board to ask him the question that this is a big building that's 200 feet wide, and I don't think our ladder will span the top of it, the biggest fire truck. And is he okay that he can't get to two sides of it? And is the police chief okay too? Because I guess there's gravel that goes around the outside edge. And I asked if it would be shoveled, and they said, oh yeah, we will probably shovel it. But I just want to hear from the police chief and the fire chief that they are okay with that, because this is a big building and I just want to make sure for the safety. And I think part of our site plan criteria is to improve access to each structure for fire and emergency service equipment. And I just want to make sure we have that. And another thing I looked at today, which I was concerned about, is this site plan was designed with design review, and on number 8 in the rules and regulations, the applicant came back and said that the buffering will be the trees in front of this property. But now we're finding out if there's going to be a subdivision and they're going to sell off the front property, that buffering may go away. So part of our zoning bylaw 709-020 says truck loading areas must be screened from view. If this lot is really going to go to a subdivision and the trees in front of it are going to be cut down, then we may need more trees and screening for the warehouse and the truck loading areas. So that was another thing that I wanted to talk about. And let's see. When we talked about the trucks coming and going, I was looking through the other Bartlett Street decisions and minutes from the other meetings. And one thing that they also had a condition in some of them was no idling of trucks before a certain time. This warehouse, if approved, would be the closest to neighborhoods and to the school, and it would have the most impact. And if we decide to, depending on where this goes, I think we should also look into that too. No idling trucks before, a certain time. Some people say 6 a.m., but I thought that would be something we could talk about. And also in the other decisions, a lot of conditions were to do a sound analysis when the building was before the building was built. They asked for a sound analysis. So if there is if there are loud noises after it's built, they have something to base it on. And I don't know if this was included. I went down the conditions that Fred always has with the no vehicle maintenance and no washing, but some of the older decisions also had no refueling on site. I don't know if that's something we need to include if we decide to go forward. And I would also like to add, in the site plan, it talks about improving pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle safety. If we decided to go through that with this, I'd also like a condition for some mitigation to build the stairs to cross the aqueduct, because there's a trail there and a lot of people use it. And the discussion had come up that it's going to be really steep and it's going to need stairs and it would fall under the Conservation Commission. But I know with a lot of big projects, there is mitigation. And one of the mitigation things I'd like to ask for would be money. And I don't know if it would go to the Conservation Commission so they could build the stairs so the path could continue if this was decided to be built. And I guess actually my main question would be for the applicant. There's a special permit because you want to build this access way on Groundwater 1. And I think from Mr. Donahoe's letter, it said that you're 13 feet onto Groundwater 1. Is that true?
Within the lot, yes.
So, okay. And then it goes out more because it looks like at the bottom of the driveway, there's like a bell, but that's not included on your lot. Is that what the property line is? And then is it part of the easement for the street? Like if you look at the design where
That's correct. The 13 feet is within our land and the rest of it is within the public right of way.
So there is more on Groundwater 1, but it's just not on your property.
Right, which is currently gravel driveway, part of the shoulder of Bartlett Street. And
Yep.
just off the side of the shoulder, or just.
Okay, so that would be paved. And I guess my main question is, if it's only 13 feet, why wouldn't you just move it over 13 feet? Like, why does it have to be here? In your application, it says this is the only viable access. And you own the site to the east. Why can't it just move 13 feet? I guess is my question.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'll let either Rob or Dave respond to that. Really, it just has to do with providing appropriate sight lines as vehicles come in and out of the site, but I'll let Dave or Rob expand on that.
Rob, did you want to go first? Or?
No, you can go first.
Yeah, so I mean, basically we believe that the geometry of that driveway as it is now is the safest that it can be. And we need to encroach a little bit on Groundwater 1 so that our driveway isn't kinking in a strange way that would make it difficult for trucks to pass each other. And then the other reason why it is where it is we've made the radii the way that they are and encroaching onto Groundwater 1 because it allows for large trucks which are exiting the property to stay in their own lane so that they don't need to cross over into oncoming traffic. I know some of the abutters and some of the board members, their big concerns are safety and, having a safe approach. And we believe that this is the best alignment so that we keep the trucks where they need to be.
That land also, as you know from visiting the site, is currently paved and would likely remain paved, for the foreseeable future. So we didn't feel that we were derogating or deteriorating land that wasn't already impervious and paved. And then lastly, the right-of-way that has historically been in that location aligns with that roadway, which is why, the roadway is where it is. So.
Okay. If I could ask one more question, this is to Fred. Do you agree that that's the safest location, that it couldn't be moved 13 feet over and still have the proper line of sight and the same width to, so trucks could pass each other? Does it have to be in that location? I don't know, is Fred there?
Yep,
just
Fred, you're on-
just
there you
just
go.
trying to get unmuted. That's all.
Sorry for
Sorry.
putting you on the spot.
No, it's all right. I do believe that's the safest location. I think that the moving of the groundwater line 13 feet to get the driveway access out of groundwater 1 is fairly insignificant. It's no different than the fact that Bartlett Street travels through the groundwater 1, except that they're going to have better drainage on their driveway. That was why the discussion went the way it did at the Groundwater Advisory Committee meeting. It's appropriate for them to recommend approval of moving that line. It doesn't have to move the entire 50 feet. It just needs to move that 13 feet to get beyond their property line.
So what you're saying is it's okay to move the 13 feet? I guess I didn't understand that.
I'm saying that it is okay. It doesn't impact the groundwater anymore, if not less than having Bartlett Street go through groundwater 1.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was why the discussion went the way it did at the Groundwater Committee meeting when they recommended approval of that, moving that line.
Right. I just remember I'm on the groundwater and I remember everybody saying, oh, 13 feet. But I think what is significant is I've found that everything that is approved sets precedent. So the next person comes in and says, well, you gave them 13 feet. I want 30 feet. So that's my concern, if to not set precedent if it can move over 13 feet and it does the same job. If it's just as safe, if you move it 13 feet, so then they don't need the special permit to go onto groundwater 1.
If the question is still directed at me, I'll throw out that I believe that it aligns best with the access that they have to get over the aqueduct and prevent the cars from trucks from traveling across in an awkward angle coming in and out of Bartlett Street, as David had indicated.
Okay.
Yeah, if I might, Madam Chair, I'd echo that, and if perhaps Dave Robinson can provide some more color, but the location of the specific crossing of the aqueduct is obviously immutable. It's not capable of being moved. So the design has to work in that direction, which drives a lot of it, but David can provide more detail.
Yeah, so we do have as Mark mentioned, we do have a specific easement that we can cross over the aqueduct. And as you know, we've walked the site before, it's fairly close to Bartlett Street. There's really not enough room there to put a kink in it and move it out of the groundwater and still have it be a safe driveway where these trucks can get in and out. Just because of the nature of that, this is our point of crossing, and then we just come straight into Bartlett Street without doing any crazy kink or anything that's going to make an unsafe turn, necessitate unsafe turn maneuvers onto Bartlett Street, kind of as Fred mentioned.
Okay.
Any other questions from you?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. I have a couple of additional questions. One is, I thought I requested last time, but I did not see it. I was looking for the copy of the 8M permit, and additionally, I'd like to see the application that went for that as well. So I haven't seen that yet. I don't know if that's something who can provide. I was just looking for a copy of that. The sewer impact, did we discuss that? What were the gallons for the was that in here? I'm sorry if you've already stated it. Do we have that on record here?
Why don't we take a moment and ask Dave to review the sewer so we can answer your question and have it on the record.
Sure, no problem. I also had some concerns about the fire. I think last time I had mentioned as well.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we have him answer the sewer question while we're on it?
Oh, I thought you suggested give him some time to review it. Okay.
If he can answer it now.
Yes, so we did. The sewer flows are very low typically for these buildings. I'm pulling up my spreadsheet right now. But we did provide that as part of the section 7.2 requirements for the site plan approval. When we resubmitted in February, we gave a whole list of section 7.2 requirements, and water and sewer generation is on there. I'm pulling up my spreadsheet now, and I can give you a good idea of what we're looking at for sewer generation. It's very low, as I mentioned, about 15 gallons per day per employee.
But we don't know how many employees are.
We base it on the number of parking stalls.
Oh, okay. So what would that equate to?
150 parking stalls. We assume about 150 employees. Is that roughly what you see, Israel?
Yes.
So should I calculate 150 times 15, and that's 2,250 gallons per day?
That's very close. I can get you the exact number. My computer's just lagging a second here, but that's very, very close to what it's going to be, which is a pretty low sewer generation. So there's a lot of square footage with the building, but not a lot of water and sewer use.
We've also paid a fee, I believe, for sewer capacity for the site based on guidance for the sewer utilization that we received from either the engineering department or the DPW.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. The other question I had, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I was moving on to fire. So I had the same concern about fire. It looks like you really can't access two sides of the building. Obviously, that building is pretty jammed up against woods. So I guess if there were a fire and we didn't have the right access to it, certainly the fire is heading straight towards all the neighborhoods. So I want to make sure that as well, to echo what Amy said, I want maybe the fire chief can either speak at a meeting or submit a letter, but I do want it in writing that there's it's fine from their perspective that we don't have access to the long side of the building in the back.
So can I just jump in quickly on the fire? First of all, you were exactly right. The total sewer usage that we submitted in gallons per day is 2,250. It's based on 150 employees, based on 150 parking spaces, and Title V regulations say 15 gallons per day. Moving on to the fire, when we met with the fire chief, his request was that we added a 24-foot wide access on the northernmost portion of the building that provides 3 sides of fire access, which was acceptable to him. He did issue a letter, which Kathy, I believe, read off at the last meeting, and he also that was his only concern. That was his only comment at the time. We made that submission, that change early in the project. We submitted it, and we believe that meets the comments that the fire chief had. Also, I'll mention that these buildings have very robust sprinkler systems, which certainly doesn't hurt.
So I did see that letter from the fire chief, and he referenced the December 18th site plan. So I don't have him on record looking at the most up-to-date site plan. I would also want in writing that he is perfectly fine with 0 access to the long side of the building. That's the lengthwise back of the building. So that's just something I'd want to either hear from him or have his letter updated to at least reflect the right site plan. it might be a mismatch by mistake, but I have nothing on record that references the right site plan. And I had some, so regarding the traffic plan, I had some questions about, I'm still looking at an analysis done on October 16th, 2019. Is that the only day that there was information recorded?
2 days.
Yes,
I'm sorry,
that's,
who answered that? So the information was recorded on one day. And if that day, if we're looking at pedestrians and bikers, and that October 16th day was pouring rain and the sunset at 6 o'clock, how do we like say, I mean, I feel like it's missing a range of dates where, what about, you know, a sunny August night? How does that, how do you kind of reconcile one day, well, snapshot in time and extrapolate that across a statement about the traffic across the year?
so we don't count on rainy, inclement weather days. We count on, you know, overcast, maybe there's some mist in the air, but not raining days. So if bicyclists and pedestrians are part of the discussion, and there's something that is important on a roadway like Bartlett Street where there really aren't facilities for those uses out there, we would go for not even a misty day or a foggy day. We'd go for an overcast or a nice day. What we do is we try to capture times that are average in every way, shape, and form. We actually do traffic counts that span over the course of several days out there. Well, we do our peak hour counts on one day so that we can capture the whole network of traffic between and how traffic flows between the different intersections. We also put road tubes out there to try to make sure that the day that we captured is consistent with the day before and the day after, so that we're catching an average day. Traffic engineers as an industry don't go out and count multiple different days. And particularly for a project of this magnitude where we have such, to be honest, small traffic generation coming out of it, we wouldn't go above and beyond doing just a simple one day with 3 days of daily traffic data included in that. So that's, and it's, we just want to make sure it's not a holiday. We want to make sure it's not inclement weather. And we want to make sure that it's not, you know, it's not impacted some other way. And usually what we do is we go out and we just double check and make sure that the volumes are average.
Or even at that time, we had a EEE advisory. So that's, and that's a wooded area. So I don't know, does that make a difference? I don't know. I'm not a traffic expert. I'm just asking questions.
No, it wouldn't make a difference on the traffic volumes themselves that we're capturing out here. Again,
no,
most
pedestrians,
I hear you.
and
Pedestrian with no accommodations out there. I would tell you that the numbers are going to be relatively low. If there were a sidewalk out there, maybe it would be different. We might want to capture that information. But with no pedestrian, and by the way, we do capture that information, but it's not a focus of what we are going to be analyzing in the long term out here. The impacts of this project are going to be mostly on traffic operations in the area, not pedestrians. If this was a residential development, we may spend a little bit more time focusing on bicycle and pedestrian, but it's a warehouse. It's not going to generate any pedestrian traffic.
Okay, and so do you feel like with the addition of the warehouses on this report that we see an accurate reflection of best and worst case scenarios, or?
Yeah, the study is accurately going to portray an operation out here of what this warehouse will have, what its impacts are going to have on the local area roadway network. There's going to be, you know, minor delay increases to the tune of like an added second of delay for somebody based on the models, which is insignificant in the grand scheme of things. If we were talking about an extra 10 seconds, 20 seconds of added delay for somebody wanting to take a left turn out of Lyman Street as a result of this project, I'd be having a different conversation with you. But in this particular case here, with the minor generation of traffic coming from this, there really is no impact that's tangible and measurable out here from an operations perspective. I get the concern about safety and the heavy vehicles, and we're trying to address that through the change that we made. But at the same point in time, you know, from an operational perspective, the impacts of this project are less significant than 3 of the projects that we just added out here, the one exception being the one Lyman Street project.
Okay. The other question I had is related to groundwater. Part of our considerations is the simplicity, reliability, and feasibility of the control measures proposed, and the degree of threat which would result if the control measures failed. Where in this report would I find that type of information in terms of, relative simplicity? What happens if it fails? What's our best and worst case scenario out there?
Are you referring to the stormwater report?
Yes, that's right. I think it was submitted by, I'm missing the name here. The firm that submitted the groundwater report, Allen and yes. So does that report include anything where I could reasonably extract information about reliability, feasibility, and potential threats should they fail? Threats to the wetlands should they fail?
Should what fail?
Yeah.
The control measures proposed?
What control measures?
Whatever is listed in the report as what belongs out there for whatever stormwater control or catch basins or whatever else, or whatever they have to put in. Oh, Fred, yes, hello.
Perhaps I could help. I believe that the area that you're talking about is not so much drainage, that's drainage that's been submitted, the drainage analysis that's been submitted is typical of any site plan, whether it's in groundwater or not. It's required under the stormwater regulations that they attenuate the storms and release it at a rate less than it was prior to. What the section of the bylaw I think they're talking about is when a project that's in a groundwater area has some potentially toxic or hazardous material stored, manufactured, or otherwise delivered and warehoused on the site, what safeguards are put in place to make sure that there's no spill that could potentially get into the groundwater and harm it. And then the analysis that you're referring to, I believe, is what happens if those safeguards fail. In this particular case, they've not indicated the storage of any toxic or hazardous materials, so therefore there is no measure to be put in place other than a condition, if the project is approved, that limits them to no storage of any toxic or hazardous materials without an additional special permit from the board and a visit with the Groundwater Advisory Committee to review their safeguards and proposal on how they would store, manufacture, or warehouse that material. That help?
Okay, so that is helpful, thank you. But I'm actually looking at the procedures for issuance of a special permit, and one of the special permit, part of the, I guess, requirements or under what conditions a special permit should be granted includes that in making the determination, the special permit granting authority shall give consideration to simplicity, reliability, and feasibility of the control measures proposed and the degree of threat, and the degree of threat to water quality, which would result if the control measures fail. So I don't know if that's related to hazardous or not. It very well could be, but that's just to put it into context of what I'm looking at.
I think that applies to any material that would be stored on site. And since they're not proposing to store anything on site at this point, there's nothing to have for countermeasures.
True, and we don't know who the tenant is or what they're going to store. So that's
we don't, which is why I'm sorry to interrupt. Which is why the committee recommends approving it with no storage or of toxic or hazardous material without an additional review by the board and amendment to the special permit. So they can't put anything on the site that could potentially be toxic or hazardous material. The staff, the building inspector and myself review tenants when they want to come into a building and ask them what they're going to do in there, and then determine if they have any material. If it's got to have safeguards, the safeguards can't be imposed by staff. They have to go back to the board for an amendment to the permit. So we only work with a tenant to make sure that they understand they can't store anything. And if they say, well, this is what we, if it's a paint supply company or a hardware store or automotive parts where they have antifreeze and oil and things like that, we would send them back to the board at the point at which they come to the building inspector for a fit up permit or a building permit for inside the building.
And if I can just
Got it.
amplify
Okay.
on that, Madam Chair, that is to some extent, a tried and true path that has been utilized in the groundwater protection district for a number of projects. The specific condition was imposed most recently in 2018 for 301 Bartlett Street for this developer. So it's a process that we've utilized on other buildings, and would fully anticipate utilizing it again here rather than trying to deal with the level of conjecture.
Okay, so then speaking of other properties, I believe at one Conservation Commission meeting, there was a discussion about a mudslide into the wetlands for whatever was done or how it was set up or created. I don't know, I'd have to look back. And so I believe there was something about, there was a mudslide into the wetlands and we should have done X, Y, Z. So what I'm getting at is, I want to understand, should X, Y, Z not be on the table and we make a decision and next thing you know, we have another mudslide into the wetlands, then what? What have we done our due diligence to check and make sure that we had those controls in place? We evaluated the potential threat, should they not work as we anticipate, and just kind of really consider those things. So that's really what my line of questioning is related to.
Well, if I might, I think that question starts to confuse issues with all due respect. With regard to whatever assertion of a mudslide, without going down that rabbit hole of what's happened in other projects somewhere else. But the plans that you have before you include an erosion and control plan that becomes part of the site plan approval and needs to be implemented for it. Your bylaw provides and state law provides that the town can do regular inspections of the property. To the extent it involves wetlands, the Conservation Commission has broad plenary authority to protect wetlands in those kind of cases, including issuing cease and desist orders for work going on. So there's an entire mechanism to deal with how a site's going to be built, which is far different than how it's going to be operated. As it gets to the issue of operation, for the purposes of this level of approval, what the applicant has said is we're not going to have toxic or hazardous materials on site. And therefore, there's really no analysis to be done as to what could go wrong since they're not going to be there. And recognizes, as the applicant particularly has recognized from other applications they have been awarded by this board, that if that changes, then you have to go back around the loop and come back to both town staff, submit additional reports, and ultimately come back to this board.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other comments from the board before I move on to public comments?
I do.
Sure, Michelle, was that you?
Yep, I do. So, Dave, I had a couple of comments for you regarding the driveway. I know you were talking a little bit about why you thought the driveway should be as presented. And I was just thinking about how we talked about, and we've done this before with other applicants, whereas the trucks exit the driveway, in this case, we're going to ask them to take a left going out to Marlboro. You know, that's really difficult to enforce as far as, I mean, the police aren't going to be there. It's going to be hard to figure out how to do that. But in other communities, what I've seen work out is that the driveway is designed as it goes out onto Bartlett Street, which just forces the driver to only turn left. Is that possible on this parcel to do?
Well, you have other cars on site though, right? You have passenger vehicles for the employees. You have, vehicles that are not semi trucks. You might have contractors who need to do fit up work inside. So I would say, they're not subject to those left only turns, those kind of vehicles. So, I mean, we need to accommodate those people as well. It's not all trucks. And I don't know, Rob, if you would have any input, but I'd say that there's probably going to be more of those smaller vehicles exiting the site on an average day if there's 100 up to 150 regular employees. So I think we need to make sure we're accommodating those people as well that aren't subject to those.
I would suggest if we were on the other side of the road, we could channelize a right turn lane to sort of make that happen. Unfortunately, we can't channelize a left turn lane that physically channelize it to make traffic go in that direction without compromising all the other movements within the intersection. So I agree with Dave. There's no way to sort of physically design an intersection to force traffic to go left, just commercial traffic to go left out of the driveway in this particular case.
Because as far as trucks go, you're seeing either large trucks similar to the size of a Federal Express truck or smaller ones like they do for an Amazon delivery. So it's that variety of trucking that'll coming out of the property.
I would again, not knowing the final user of the site, we're designing it to accommodate both tractor trailer trucks and smaller box unit trucks that would be coming and going. Should a user emerge that was different, and had a different, delivery system, maybe we could come back to the board and suggest a different approach. But without knowing that the final user is, I don't think that that's appropriate here.
Okay, and we talked about the user just being a warehouse. If the user were to actually come back to be more of a Federal Express facility, would you be willing to come back to the board again to discuss that? Because that would just change a lot of what we're discussing tonight.
I think the reality is that we'll very likely be back in front of the board regardless of what the user is. Not surprised, I think with all of the projects, I think the building inspector or others can speak to it that have more longevity on the planning board. But what we're doing is we're designing more or less a generic box. And once we identify a user, we'll probably be back with modifications to the site plan. And at that time, where we will have identified a user, to the extent that there's a change to the site plan, which there usually is, because again, we're just designing something generically, we'll be back in front of the planning board and we'll be talking about if, just to use an unlikely scenario, but if for some reason there was going to be a toxic chemical manufacturer that was going to be there, that would be the kind of thing that would be addressed at that time.
Okay. And then I don't know if we want to talk tonight about lights, but as you know, I've been really advocating to get some lights down on Bartlett Street. And I did read the light memo on July 10th. And was it the applicant decided now not to put the light that they, one or two lights that we agreed to out on it would be on the applicant's portion of the land, not the town-owned land. Is that no longer something that you'd be considering, or you're still considering that? It's just that you're looking for feedback and that's the feedback you got, because obviously the feedback said no lights.
I think we are intending, the site plan that we've submitted most recently has the light along Bartlett, as close to Bartlett as possible. So
Okay.
we're not changing that. That's we're not proposing any changes to what we've already presented, and what we've presented includes that light. I believe it's one light at the corner along Bartlett Street.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Okay.
So no
And then
change. We're not backing away from what we've committed to doing.
Thank you for the light. I appreciate it. And then the last thing is just to talk a little bit about design review. So typically in design review, we have approved many of these, what we call warehouses. We did one over where you've got the U-Haul place. It's not as significant in the size, but we've done a lot of them. And I do know that there's a member of, and Kathy can talk to it as well, a member of the design review committee. His name is Dave Veron. He's very knowledgeable about snow removal. And he will often talk to applicants about, the whole perimeters of the building. Is there enough? Should we need to get to one side of the building and there's significant snowfall? What if they need to access the backside? And I believe that we had this discussion with the applicants. I can't remember exactly what we agreed upon. Maybe Kathy can weigh in on that. But we do talk about trying to, in these big warehouses where there might be some doors that aren't used on a regular basis, but used for safety purposes, that we have those areas somewhat cleared should fire or police need to get to the back of the building. And like I said, there's a significant snowfall. We often have these discussions with these applicants, with several applicants on these buildings, because that's one topic that comes up with. And then Dave Verond is, he owns a landscaping company, does most of the plowing for some of these larger buildings. So I think we had the discussion. I just can't remember exactly, Kathy, what we came to as far as an agreement.
If I may, I don't know, Kathy, if you wanted to respond. So what we agreed was that, so the initial pathway that was along the backside of the building was narrower. I believe it was only 8 feet wide at the time. And then as a result of that conversation and the comments made by the design review committee members, we widened out the pathway to allow more access, create the opportunity for the doors, the exit doors that needed to be at the rear of the building to open up and swing open and not have any issues. So again, we're trying to balance the amount of impervious space and trying to keep the footprint as tight as we could, but we did end up widening out, and I think it's at least 15 feet now along that backside of the building.
Okay, thank you. All set. Thank you, Carrie.
I can't hear you. Oh, I can't.
Sorry about that. Yep, sorry. So no further questions from board members or any additional questions? All set? Okay, and anything from staff? Any additional questions or comments? No. Okay, so I'd like to open it up to public comment. So I have a couple of hands raised here. I'm going to just go in order as I've seen them. So I'm calling on here John Wickstead. So hold on a second. Okay, John, welcome. You're able to speak now.
Hi, I'm John Wickstead. My address is 2 Stirpbrook Lane.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. Number one, I wanted to let the planning board members know that myself and a number of the neighbors and interested people in town have secured representation for ourselves on this matter because we think it's important enough for a variety of reasons. And I would say briefly, the first point I'd raise is on the groundwater. This is like 100 feet from Stirrup Brook. And we've all seen the snow piles that accumulate at grocery stores and shopping malls. We have no idea how many trucks are coming in and out of this place. We've got at least 150 employees. The amount of road salt, diesel debris, truck crap, and dirt that's going to be piled up in these snow piles, it's all going to drain into Stirrup Brook. Now, we may have designated snow removal areas, but as soon as they get full, whoever is using this building, and I'm sure this is, the Gutierrez company has the best planning at heart here, but whoever the end user is going to pile that snow wherever it's convenient. And if that means piling it on top of Stirrup Brook, all of that junk is going to roll right into Stirrup Brook. And Stirrup Brook rolls right into the Assabet River, and the Assabet River rolls right into the Concord River, and we're going to have a groundwater problem on our hands. You can't put a 4-acre building and a 4-acre parking lot 150 feet away from a brook and not expect to have problems. With all due respect to the Groundwater Advisory Committee, none of these people are civil engineers with enough experience to look at a 200-page civil engineering report and determine whether it's valid. And I would urge the town to get independent peer review from somebody who actually knows professionally how groundwater mitigation actually works to see whether or not this plan has any validity. The second point I would make is on safety. We've got 150 employees in this building, let alone the number of trucks coming in and out of that intersection. And we've got kids from Southborough driving back and forth on this road every day. Just to put this in perspective, we currently have about 120 teachers working at Algonquin. And we've got 150 employees at this building. That's more than all of the teachers that we have and administrators at Algonquin. It's a crazy number of people. Lastly, I would say in terms of safety, we already have problems with the number of trucks on that road. We can tell them to turn left and head to Marlboro, but they are not going to do it. And anybody who's been on that road, you know, I was mowing my lawn the other day and we had 4 FedEx trucks drive by in the period of time it took me to mow my lawn. They do not follow the rules that we give them, and the town does not have the resources to enforce that. I think it's silly to think that they're going to turn left. These are truck drivers who are going to turn whichever way is convenient for them. That's aside from the 150 employees that we've got. And if you've tried to get in and out of the high school during peak commute times, you've seen how well that road backs up. This traffic is going to be significant, and that carries significant safety risks for our kids. The last point I would make is that we really have no idea who this user is. I'm sure the company has the best interests of development at heart, but as they said themselves, they're building a generic building. And we can't know with a generic building whether we're going to have 15 trucks moving in and out of a warehouse or 150 Amazon trucks coming in and out of that building. Once the planning board passes this, we lose control, and we have no longer any control over what actually happens in that building. And I think the planning board needs to bear in mind that they're making a decision that's going to impact Northborough and our groundwater for the next 40 years. Once this building goes in, that's it. We lose control over it. And if you put it 150 feet away from Stirrup Brook, you have no control over what happens in that building. And I would urge the planning board to find somebody who's got civil engineering experience and groundwater knowledge to review this thing before you go putting it through, because it's going to affect Northborough for the next 40 years. Thank you.
Great, thank you for joining us. I'm gonna take public comments right now. Next down the list, I have Benjamin Tymon. Benjamin, John, I'm gonna move you out of the section here. All right, there we go. Benjamin, hello, can you hear me?
I can, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, great.
Ben Tymon from Tymon, Davis and Duffy in Boston. I'm actually the representative that Dr. Wickstead referenced. I was just retained today, so I come into the meeting with a fairly healthy degree of humility because I'm new to the project. I did, though, have the chance to look at relevant bylaws, some of the application materials today, and then listening to a lot of the comments tonight, and actually some of the concerns that I've developed in a preliminary review mirror several of the comments made by board members. So I just wanted to kind of tick through very quickly, as succinctly as I can, some of the things that I see on behalf of the Wicksteads and some of the other neighbors. The Wicksteads, as Dr. Wickstead alluded to, are near neighbors. There are abutters to abutters within 300 feet. They're on the notice list at 2 Stirrup Brook Lane. So first of all, with respect to the standards and criteria that was discussed at the beginning of the meeting, and this has been acknowledged certainly by the applicant team and by the board tonight, but part of this project is in Area 1, in Groundwater Area 1. And as the board knows, that does give rise to a more heightened level of scrutiny for the project. There's language in that section of the bylaw requiring that there be a finding of no detriment to the water supply. And, you know, under the Groundwater Protection Overlay District in general, as the board knows, if a use is not specifically delineated as permitted, it's prohibited irrespective of the underlying zoning, subject to the special permit process. But again, the Area 1 criteria are stricter. I would note that in the application, the revised application submitted by the applicant in Section 3, where it lists the types of special permits it's seeking, and this was discussed early on in the meeting, it mentions subsection D3C, which is the Area 3 criteria. It fails to mention subsection D3A, which is the Area 1 criteria. So I think it's important that the board, as it's been alluding to tonight, make sure that it scrutinizes this under an Area 1 special permit criteria. On a related point, and this touches on something that you raised, Madam Chair, it has to do with application requirements. This is in subsection 4A, which talks about what needs to be included in the special permit application. Again, I'm new to this, so I may have missed something in the application materials, but number 5 talks about an analysis by a technically qualified expert certifying that the quality and supply of the underlying groundwater resources will not be degraded to the point whereby a hazard to public health or ecological damage results. Now, contrary to what some members of the applicant team said, that language is not confined to situations where there will be hazardous materials stored. That's an important factor. I haven't seen that type of analysis. I certainly didn't see anything in the couple 100-page drainage report that made that type of analysis. And so, as some members have said tonight, that's going to be critically important that type of analysis take place, because you're talking about a huge amount of impervious surface that's being added between this 150,000 square foot warehouse and pavement. And so that certainly needs to be part of the analysis that is spoken to in that part 5 of the application materials, as well as the criteria that Madam Chair addressed further down about mitigation and the effectiveness of mitigation. I would note that, and this came up as well, that the special permit criteria of the bylaw generally, which are those 7 criteria stated in 70340 under traditional special permit criteria, those should all be scrutinized carefully by the board. I'm sure you will be doing that, but those cover the traditional areas such as adverse effect on the neighborhood, on abutters, whether it'll conform to special permit granting authority, will it reasonably, proposal cannot reasonably be altered to reduce adverse impact, etc. So nuisance, noise, and the like. So those things are all going to be important, I think, for the board to look at, as it would with any type of special permit. I know I'm taking up a lot of time, so let me just wrap up by saying that on the traffic numbers, and Dr. Wickstead alluded to this as well, it was said tonight that there's expected to be 150 employees based on 150 spaces. And of course, we don't know the type of operation and whether a delivery facility, for example, would have many other trucks coming in and out. But the trip generation numbers that I saw in the traffic report that I just received today projects 33 entering vehicles during the peak AM hour and 34 exiting vehicles during the peak PM hour. That's only 1/5 of the anticipated number of employees. And so that seems like, to me, to be understated. That underscores the importance of peer review, I think, on traffic, certainly on groundwater protection. There really needs to be rigorous peer review, as others have said. With that, I'll conclude and thank the board for its time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to move you out. Next, I have on my list here, Laurie Donovan. Oops, let's see. You are on an older version of Zoom, but I'm going to try to get you in here anyway. Okay, Laurie, can you hear me? Oops, there you are. Sorry to surprise you on video, but I can hear you. Let's see. Hold on one second, Laurie.
Thank you.
Okay, there you are. We should be able to hear you. Just say your name and address.
Sure. It's Laurie Donovan, 66 Bartlett Street. And I wanted to kind of elaborate. I appreciate Mr. Dayton's concern with, really the honor system of trucks utilizing the Bartlett Street to get to their destinations, because all my comments are really anecdotal at this point, but living directly on Bartlett Street, I can tell you that the FedEx Express trucks and a lot of larger trucks come through our street, and I live sort of at the beginning of the Bartlett Street quite frequently, and late at night many times. And I've noticed also I have children who walk to high school, and
I also have children that like to skateboard and bike, and those trucks go awfully fast. So adding more to that, even if it's very small, is, I think, a concern for our neighborhood. And I would like to have some sort of policing so that they're not using our street to gain access to their destination. That is an issue. And I don't know how it can be policed, but that is definitely an important issue. The second thing I wanted to say was in regard to pedestrian traffic. Again, anecdotally, living on Bartlett Street, there are quite a few bikers and a lot of high school students who are done with sports. They want to walk to a destination, and they are walking around these neighborhoods. So there are at times quite a few bikers and walkers on our street, regardless if there are sidewalks or not. The third thing I wanted to say is, you know, I drive around on Cedar Street, and I drive on Lyman Street, and I drive up headed towards Marlborough on Bartlett Street, and I noticed that there's a lot of empty buildings, a lot of empty warehouses. And I'm sure you've already had this discussion before, but I'm just curious as to why we need 2 more warehouses when there's so much available space surrounding this area already. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for my opportunity. Okay.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I'm going to change it back there. Okay, I have, I'm sorry, I have Leland. Let's see. I'll let you specify your name and address.
Hi, Carrie. It's Melissa and Adam Leland, and we live at 14 Stirrup Brook Lane. And
oh, hello. Okay.
Hi. I just wanted to make a couple comments regarding the traffic as well. We have several concerns. First of all, I wanted to point out that looking back on my calendar, it looked like the traffic study, I believe you said, was October 19th. That would be a—
Oh, no, I think it was sorry, it was the 16th though, just to quickly clarify.
Okay.
But I think I said 2019.
Oh, okay. I apologize then for that. What I was—
No problem.
It does not take into account the new Del Webb community that's built on Lyman Street, which has 700 condo units, I believe. And I know that it's in Westboro, but now that we have the Apex Center nearby, or Hannaford's grocery store, or any of the other businesses in town, it doesn't take into account the people that come this direction to access those different shopping points. And I would also say that, in agreement with Lori and some of the other commenters, that anytime I pull in and out of our street, I would say 7 out of 10 times there's a FedEx truck going by, or an Dewey Pile truck going by. And I find it hard to believe. Again, my brother ran the FedEx facility for a while, and I can tell you firsthand that they have no intention of going towards Marlboro if it makes more sense for them to be efficient and go the other direction depending on where their destination is. And it's very difficult to enforce. And I don't believe that the town has the resources to do so. And you know, the other buildings that have warehouse space that are for lease, it's not taking into account the trucks that will be in action once those spaces are occupied. So I just have a hard time believing that it would only be 5 to 10 trucks per day. We also had a question as to how many bays.
How many dock doors does this facility going to have?
Oh, I'm sorry. You surprised me when you had a male voice. How many?
Adam,
say that again.
How many dock doors are planned for the facility?
I think I only saw 2. Could someone please clarify? Dave Robinson, how many bays are on the building?
Yeah, 1 second. I'm just looking at the plan. I think it's 33 total. If you're talking about the loading bays, at
dock doors, loading dock doors.
Loading dock doors at the rear of the building. We have 33 total loading bays.
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, FedEx has 60 doors. If this is a building with a 33 dock door facility, warehousing is a misnomer. It's a distribution facility, which means that trucks come and go all day long. You don't put 33 dock doors in because you're just storing product. You have trucks moving in and out of the facility all day long. So just, I want to point that out clearly. And second, my only other comment would be, and I know the Conservation Committee's been involved in this, and as people have talked about Stirrup Brook, and there are miles of trails that we all know run in and around the high school, by Stirrup Brook, over Stirrup Brook. This facility goes in and it basically, we've already got an eyesore looking at the facility on Hayes Memorial. This building is that much closer to those trails and to the neighborhoods. We can already hear noise from the other buildings on the street, on Bartlett Street. So put aside the aesthetics and the intrusion it has on the trails that are built around the high school and all the Stirrup Brook trails, the extra noise, the traffic, and the vacancy in all these buildings and the lights and everything else. I understand that we obviously, it's zoned a certain way, but you know, the level of concern that we have relative to all those items is very high.
Okay, great. Thank you both for your comments. I'm sorry, I caught the first name, but was it Rich Leland, Melanie and Rich?
It's Adam and Melissa.
Okay, I got that totally wrong. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks for the
All
time.
right. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. I have Lisa Maselli. Lisa?
Hello, Lisa
Hello.
Maselli, Maple. Thanks for looking at my hand, Carrie. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to try to get my my thoughts aligned here. The first thing that my biggest concern obviously is the wetlands and any toxic or hazardous waste tenants. In the beginning of the discussion, it was said that there was going to be a condition that there was not going to be any toxic or hazardous waste tenants. Is that correct? Is that going to stay there? Because as we were going down a little bit further, it was said that, well, they would be coming before the board if in fact that was going to be a tenant. So I'm confused as to whether or not the condition that you put in is a condition that is appealable. Because a tenant such as United, which is on Railroad Drive, I think just off of Lyman Street, does porta potties. And they store the porta potties there. I have no idea what they do with the product that they put into the porta potties, or the product that once the porta potties have been used, where that goes. I don't even know if that's something that gets inspected on a regular basis. And in this area, and I don't think Railroad is much different, but in this area, you've certainly got a lot of groundwater and everything else over there that could be exceptionally hazardous. So I'd like a little answer to that if I could get it. The second remark is that the traffic impact is going to be huge, and we feel it here on Maple Street. My road now isn't even a neighborhood anymore, it's just a highway. I have a police car that sits here usually at noontime or 10 o'clock in the morning. There's not a lot of traffic then, but commuter time, it's like a highway. And we've got a truck restriction that was granted in 2014 that's yet to be honored. We can't get signage on the road. We can't get the trucks off the road. So I don't know how this is not going to impact, be an adverse effect to the neighborhood, not just on Bartlett, but on our street as well. So,
so sure. So just, I am curious about the first question. Is there a possibility of a tenant that would require hazardous storage, in which you, just to clarify your statement, I think you made it, Israel, is that something that is possible? Coming back to the board with a tenant that stores hazardous material?
Well, the way that the condition is written currently is that it will not be stored on site. I was just using that as just an example of, and maybe a poor example of the fact that whatever the use is going to be, we're going to have to go back to the planning board for approval for an occupancy permit. So That's not
Okay.
a different process than is followed for any tenant.
Right, right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. All right, Lisa, does that answer your question?
Okay, so that there will not be any, that will be a condition that cannot be changed or altered. Is that what you said?
If we vote on that condition, that would remain a condition. Any condition, I mean, any application, I suppose, is appealable, but that if we vote on that as a condition, it would remain in there.
All right, well, that's great to know. And then the idea of the subdivision coming after that, when you've gone through all this and granted all of these conditions and done everything to this site in this plan, how does the subdivision come along using the same land and change that? It's also, it's going to change the sewer usage, probably. It's going to change, maybe, I don't know if it's on groundwater or not, must be. How does that affect your following decision, since you're already making a decision on one separate piece of land, and now we're going to cut into it after that decision's been made?
That's a good point. I'm going to bookmark that, though, because we do have the subdivision hearing as a separate component, so I don't want to blur the lines, even though I understand what you're saying. So I do want to bookmark that as a comment.
All right, and then finally, just out of curiosity, when you build a sewer line from this building over the aqueduct or under, how do you get it across the aqueduct to get it onto Bartlett Street? Is that in the plans? I didn't remember.
Do you want me to quickly just tell you? So we went through extensive permitting with the Mass Water Resources Authority. They're the ones who own and maintain the aqueduct. And basically the aqueduct is very far below grade. It's about 15 feet below grade. And we're only installing our sewer force main between 3 to 5 feet above grade. So we're just putting all of our utilities well above the existing aqueduct in that earthen berm that crosses over the aqueduct. We went through extensive permitting. We were granted an 8M permit. We created a plan and profile showing all of the utilities going through, and the MWRA signed off on it. And basically we're going well above it. We're not going to come anywhere near it or disturb the aqueduct. And we have the permission from the granting authority at this time.
Okay, so it just basically, you're not going to notice it really, because the aqueduct's going to have the same height. It's just going to go in between that 15 feet up.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, let's see. I have Ann Beckstrom on the line. I'm going to pull you in here. Ann, you are on the line. Oops, I can't hear you though.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, still good? Are you still able to hear?
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
We are, yep, go ahead.
Beckstrom, I live on 152 Bartlett Street in Northborough. And obviously I had mentioned this before, that the truck traffic is our number one concern, along with obviously the impact to the environment. And definitely appreciate that you are at least acknowledging the nuisance that the trucks are going to present, and appreciate your attempt at a commitment to address the traffic flow away from our area. Although I have to agree with what everyone else has said, that I don't really believe it's enforceable based on what I've seen. I was wondering, Rob, that did the traffic study, was that an independent review or not? Was that?
So the applicant hired, Rob, you're VHB, I think?
I'm with VHB, correct.
Yep, so the applicant hired VHB to conduct a traffic study.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a peer review, separate peer review might be in order. Kind of wondering about some of the math that I heard. I'm not sure if I heard it incorrectly, but you were talking about the one Lyman Street 17,000 foot facility only resulting in 15 to 25 peak time vehicles, whereas another facility, 167,000 square feet, which is 10 times that, only drawing, double that of 50 to 55. It doesn't really seem to make sense. So I'm just wondering if extrapolating all of that really is telling us a true story about what kind of extra traffic we would see from this facility on top of all the other ones. And then I guess, I guess I don't understand. I hear warehouse is different than what Dewey Pile and FedEx is, but yet to me, I think of warehouse with a bunch of product in there that needs to get in and it needs to get out. And I think that that results in more trucks going in and out than what has actually been represented to us by both here and then on the one Lyman Street. And then lastly, just a comment around the lights. It's really a double-edged sword. Floodlights, I can see the floodlights that are up at Dewey Pile and FedEx, and basically in the wintertime when I'm in my front room, just about need to wear sunglasses because they're so bright, and the way that they're pointed is right at my house. So, I mean, yeah, safety, I get it. But on the other hand, there can be too much light. So I would want maybe further thought put into all of that.
Okay. Is that all, Ann?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you for your comment. Okay, let's see. I have Rich Armstrong. Oops, Rich, you should be on the line.
Carrie, did you call on us?
Yes, I did. Rich Armstrong.
I can't hear what happened.
Oh, you can't hear?
I don't know what the
Can you guys? All right, do you want me to disable you for a minute? All right, hold on, let's see. I'm gonna ask.
Carrie,
right.
can you hear us?
Rich, can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? All right, let's see. You're having some problems, so I'm gonna switch you over for a minute and come back to you. All right, let's see. Brian Gwynn. So Rich, actually, if you can hear me, we could hear you, but you obviously couldn't hear us. So I'm just gonna bring Brian in, and then I'll bring you back in again to see if we can make it work. And then if you can't hear us, maybe you can try to state your point, and I'll flip you back to the attendee side if for some reason we still can't hear you. Okay, Brian, you're on the line.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Gwynn, and I live at 6 Jenkins Drive. I'd just like to echo the points that Dr. Wickstead made earlier in the fact that I object to the special permit being granted, especially in these times where precious resources really need to be protected for the benefit of all Northborough residents. When it comes to safety, I just want to make a point that to rely on some kind of honor system for trucks and where they take their journeys is frankly ludicrous. Nobody's going to do that. These things have to be enforced with either bylaws or strict rules, and also enforced aggressively, so that the message is sent to these facilities that they really need to take note of the safety concerns. Also, I noted a little discussion about hazardous storage of materials. Well, that could be really anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be strictly controlled materials. It could be simple things like salt or cleaning chemicals that could be accidentally, spilt into that area and would cause environmental issues. And then the actual granting this special permit or whatever it is, I think would also set a precedent for other facilities to do similar things. And I don't think that's a good approach to take. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Okay, Rich, I'm going to try to bring you back on. Hopefully this works a little better. Let's see, Rich, can you hear us?
Can you hear us,
Can
Carrie?
you hear us now? Yes, we can. Can you hear me?
I can. Sorry for my hot mic issue before.
No problem. Okay, yes.
Rachel's here with me. So we're Rich and Rachel Armstrong at 10 Hemlock Drive.
So I agree with all of the comments before about how difficult a left turn will be to enforce. But even if, by some way we could enforce it, I don't know how helpful it is. There's a ton of traffic coming from Cedar Hill to the school from people driving from Southborough. And again, these are inexperienced drivers. So that would still concern me. So, I don't even know how helpful that would be if you could make a left turn. Obviously, the environmental impact that's come up tonight from everyone, including, discussing the effects on the groundwater. But I do just also want to say that there was a dog attacked at the high school by a coyote a couple of days ago. So my concern is, once you start getting rid of all that forest area, you have kids on those fields, again, not now, but in normal times, at all times of day, be it out with gym class or doing athletics. You have people using that high school with, all the time. So the impact of, what that presents in terms of, these animals losing their home and it affecting, their interaction with animals and people, also concerns me, along with all of the other, obviously, environmental impacts.
Yeah, I would just add, for those of us that live, near where this facility is planned to go in, we see the traffic on Bartlett. And this is, traffic that doesn't contend with the 400,000 square feet of warehouse that's about to open up at some point with the new facilities that are further down Bartlett. We see the traffic at the high school in the morning if you have to leave here and make a left-hand turn onto Bartlett out of our neighborhood, per se. I can't imagine that we won't have a light that would have to be put in at Lyman to contend with traffic. And as everyone else has said, trying to get these trucks to go where they should go, which is towards Cedar Hill and down, near impossible. The way we'd enforce that, I'd have to say, is just start writing tickets to people and fine them. But everything else, the environmental, I just can't understand how Northborough is becoming a trucking warehouse distribution facility. And using the word warehouse to describe this facility, it's a distribution facility. It has 33 bays on it, and trucks are going to be coming in and out. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to take the next 5 comments. I want to make sure we only have till about 9:30. So for the ones who have your hands raised now, I'm going to bring you over to make your comments. I have Megan Byron on the line. Megan, can you, there you go.
Can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Yep, Megan Byron and Andy Byron, 5 Weber Lane. At this point, I feel like all of the neighbors and abutting residents have done a really great job of sort of highlighting our concerns, but just to reiterate, I would say at the top of our list are the environmental impacts and certainly the traffic and safety impacts, especially as it relates to the high school. I think I spoke at the last meeting and I mentioned how treacherous it can be just pulling off of Sturbrook Lane on a regular day, never mind with more trucks coming down the road. I'd also be interested, I agree that there should be more due diligence, but at the point we're in with the COVID crisis, it looks like to get a true reading or a true assessment of traffic would be a few months out at this point, especially if school's not fully in session. So I think that's something we have to consider if we are going to do more studies. And also just the environmental impact. I think somebody already spoke to lighting, but from our house, we can already see lights at night from, I believe it's the FedEx building. You can also hear a lot of noise. So I think in addition to the groundwater and animals, there are the environmental impacts on families. So just wanted to reiterate what a lot of people have already spoken to, and thank you for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have the last few here. I have Jean. Jean, you are on. If you could just state your name and street.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, Gene Eisenstadt, 1 Jenkins Drive. Same idea. Pretty much appreciate all the comments that neighbors did. I also appreciate, just Megan mentioned, one of the things that I want to talk about is traffic report that was done October 16th Also, right now is very different due to COVID. Non-essential, we had stayed home for 3-4 months, still staying home. So the traffic is not going to be done correctly, the traffic report. So it has to be, I'm assuming, has to be evaluated, based on Monday through Friday when it's 7 in the morning, when the buses coming in, when the school buses coming in, when the trucks coming in. So traffic is a major concern because I do live on 1 Jenkins, which is basically right on Bartlett Street, and just opening the windows in the morning, it's just like a highway. Like somebody mentioned that that leads on Maple Street. Same idea on Bartlett Street, but highway is more consistent with this one. Is you've got traffic where your trucks go, from each direction. Some trucks go going up on the hill, some trucks going down the hill, and using the engines to stop. That just creates more noise. Adding the buses, adding the regular cars, adding more warehouses, that's only gonna increase the traffic. That's number one concern. Safety is another concern. The hazard is another concern, because right now we're pushing, the applicant is trying to push, the warehouses and build more and more, where at the moment I see a lot of warehouses are pretty much 10% capacity, and building huge monstrous warehouses where we don't have the idea what type of business is going to get into there, and what type of product they're going to do, what type of environmental is going to happen. So that's a major concern of mine as well. Fire hazards also is a major concern. I'm not sure if you guys talk about fires, but something gets spilled, something gets fluid gets dumped, something gets burned. Is that going to affect the neighborhood? Is that going to, because it's basically talking about commercial building a huge warehouse distribution centers, where something might happen, something might trigger the fire, and how's that going to affect the neighborhood? How's that going to affect the high school, elementary school, and all surrounding neighborhoods? That's my major concern: is environment, traffic, and hazardous. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. Okay. I have Jay Ray. I'm gonna bring you over.
Carrie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
John Ray,
Just say your name and address.
Sure.
Okay, great.
John Ray, 3 Willow Avenue. And, I share all the concerns that have been outlined, and I respect the time, but environment, safety, hazardous, those are top. But I do take objection with the walking piece. Like, since COVID, I don't know if people have noticed, but I was on a walk for a portion of this call, and there's dozens of people on Bartlett accessing trails, accessing the aqueducts. And the study needs to be done where we're looking not only at the traffic, but also at the cost of the residents, because this is a social bad for Northborough. And it's unfortunate we're having this conversation, but I think we need to revisit it. And I appreciate the thoughtful planning that's going on around it.
Oh, John, did you have something? You muted for a second. Did you have additional comments?
Yeah, no, but I appreciate everyone, and I'm also motivated to do everything I can to not have this happen. I mean, I'm a 9-year resident. This wasn't like this, and this has become a traffic route. Amazon distribution networks are taking over, and our town is the victim of it. So, I'm hopeful that we can come to have the appropriate regulations, because the environment, the consequences for all the things mentioned on this call, it's not worth the, putting these distribution centers, on our town borders. That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have my 3 last comments here. I'm going to take Rachel Abbeville, which that's not your name, but that's what you're coming across as, and Laura. So I'm going to bring Rachel over first. Oh, you are on an old version of Zoom. Okay, Rachel. Oh, sorry, it brings you on video when you're on an old Zoom. So surprise. Okay, go right ahead. Just say your name and address.
Okay, Michael
Burns wife for my wife Rachel's computer. We're at 4 Jenkins Drive, live here. We are one of the original residents of Stirrup Brook. I just want to state for the record the level of concern from the residents of Northborough. At the last meeting, we had 20 families that were involved in raising their thoughts and objections. Since that time, we're now approaching 50 families and growing that have expressed deep concern, all of which you've heard this evening. You know, from my end, I run one of the top internet retailers in the state in our industry. I understand about distribution facilities. We have a facility in a proper location. This is abutting a brook. It's hundreds of feet from a lake. There are so many environmental concerns. It just reeks of like a Hail Mary pass to take this piece of property and see if it sticks to the wall. But at the end of the day, with 50 families and growing and representation, you know, for me, it's important that my employees and my logistics team follow structure, process, procedure, and safety. And I expect the same thing from the town. I expect the same thing from my kids. And I expect the same thing for everyone involved in this project. And I just want to be clear that the residents will take appropriate action to make sure the rules, regulations, structure, and all the laws that are existing and in place are followed and adhered to. So I'll keep my comments brief. And one thing, I just want to wrap my head around one comment that was made earlier in the meeting. I'm just trying to wrap my head around a fire at this facility and our local firefighters only being able to access a limited number of portions of that building. We're abutting a residential neighborhood with a ton of children, families, conservation property, woods, forest, a brook, animals. It's just insane. How, if a fire started at that facility and they could not make the proper rescue, the devastation is just, it's insane. I can't even wrap my head around it. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, let's see, I'm gonna change it back there. Okay, now my last two comments, you're under Abbey Villa, so I'll have to ask you to state your name and address.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I apologize. I'm obviously logged under the wrong Zoom account, but this is Janine Callahan from 6 Stirrup Brook Lane, and I am representing the whole Callahan family. So I don't have anything specific to add other than what my neighbors have already stated, but I do want to stress that we moved here into the area about 15 years ago and moved into the neighborhood. I'm going to stress neighborhood for a very specific reason. It was surrounded by the schools that our children have attended, walking path, trees, and slowly that has been decimated. So on behalf of my family, I cannot we can't sit back and not express our concern as to what we feel is a huge mistake on the part of the town if they allow this to move forward. And I do want to add one more little thing. I'm sitting here, like I said, I'm at 6 Stirrup Brook Lane, and it's a beautiful night, and my windows are open, and I can hear the traffic on Bartlett, and it's frustrating. You can't sit, you can't relax because you're waiting for the next truck to drive by. So I'll just end with that and hope that the correct decisions are made on the behalf of the people that live here in this area of Northborough.
Okay, great. Thank you, Janine. Okay, and my last comment is Laura Folsom. I'm going to bring you over. Laura, you should be able to speak, but you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Planning Board, for listening to my comments. Laura Folsom, 4 Laurel Avenue. My concern as a mom, a Northborough mom, is the 2,000 students that attend Algonquin Regional High School, as well as just up on Bartlett, we have the Advanced Science and Math Academy. They have another roughly 1,000 students. When I commute back and forth to my home in Northborough, I drive Bartlett, and I see in the mornings so many students coming from Southborough and so many parents coming from Southborough. There's just an unbelievable amount of traffic. That traffic goes all the way up past Lyman and continues. I have reported multiple traffic accidents by calling the principal of Algonquin and saying there's more kids have had a traffic accident here. I can't imagine these young, inexperienced drivers having to deal with more trucks. The other thing is in the evenings and the afternoons when coming home, you have the track team, the athletic departments from both of these high schools, AMSA and ARHS, out running. And I would hate to think of what would happen, and I have seen some very close calls. I would hate to think of what would happen with these trucks rumbling back and forth. I just came back from a walk with my dogs. When I'm on Bartlett Road, I have to choke my dog's leash very short because, folks, when those trucks rumble by, even at, 7:30 on a Tuesday night, those trucks rumble by, I think, dear God, they are going to just jump the curb. They are going so damn fast. And this is our neighborhood. And I find this unacceptable at this point. Never mind adding a 36 bay, we're going to call it what it is. It's a distribution center. I'm all for moving manufacturing back to the United States from where it is now. But I think it should be done in a safe location. And that location is not on a major roadway connecting Algonquin Regional High School, the Advanced Science and Math Academy, and our neighborhoods in Northborough. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. Okay, that looks like we've concluded the public comment portion. I want to bring it back over. First, I want to make sure I have the full board is here. Yep. Okay, board members, additional comments, please.
Oh. If I could just
Michelle,
mention to the residents that I have advocated for the town of Northborough through the Board of Selectmen. I think we're on 3 letters now, but at least 2 letters, asking them to put lights all up and down Bartlett Street because I knew of what was happening with the build out there. And each time it was denied. And I personally, I don't think this applicant should have to put a street light on the end of his parcel, but you know, I agree. I know that there are a ton of kids who go up and down Bartlett Street for those when they run track and field, and how widely it's used. And you know, I just will go on record saying that I've always been disappointed the town has never done anything about the lights up there, because I think it's necessary for the amount of build up that's gone up there.
Okay. Anything else from you, Michelle?
That's all.
Okay, Anthony, anything additional? Oh, I'm sorry.
The only thing I was going to say, if the board also agreed about a peer review on traffic, I think that's worth discussing.
Okay. Anthony?
Yeah, it's the same old thing that, you know, the same things we talked about it originally was, you know, certainly traffic has become, after hearing the residents, is probably the largest concern here. But I think there are other concerns, whether it's drainage and groundwater, and your point to the fire and the chief addressing access to the back. I think runoff towards Stirrup Brook, I mean, and again, pursuing a peer review for whether it's environmental and groundwater and drainage to move forward, I think is really important.
Amy, oh, I'm sorry, Anthony, was that additional comments? Do you have additional?
Nope, I was done.
Amy?
I would agree with Michelle and Anthony too on a peer review, because this is a very sensitive area. And I just, as a board member, want to do my due diligence. I'm disagreeing.
Millie, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, sorry, did you have additional comments?
No, I disagree with I would agree with the peer review though, for groundwater, traffic, environmental, and And I don't even know if the peer review could look at safety, like with the fire and the sprinklers and accessing all four sides.
Do you have other comments?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Millie, additional comments?
I only want to just, I think, reiterate that being given the traffic study pretty recently, I did have a lot of questions about it, so I don't feel comfortable that I understand it. I did notice that there were some, I thought they looked like discrepancies, but they might be able to be explained maybe through a better and more in-depth analysis. That was it.
Okay, did you have additional comments?
That's it for me.
I was just trying to refresh my memory on information about noise. Do we have any information about base level noise or any sort of noise projections for that area? I apologize if it's already in here. If you could just point me in the direction of it. I don't know if Dave or Israel, do you have that? Oh, sorry, I can't hear you, Israel.
Yeah, sorry. No, we haven't done I don't think there's any information that we've provided in terms of what the base level of noise is in the area.
Okay, do we have any projections of what the noise level would be, say, all 33 bays have trucks running in and out, or how that,
no,
kind of what that looks like? So, and then I have a question about what's the delineation, Bob, in terms of, when is something not a warehouse versus a distribution center? Does the number of bays matter? Or so when I think of warehouse, I guess I thought of it in a different way. So I'm just trying to reset my mindset on what that is with that many bays, and is that just a warehouse? And
are you asking as your bylaw is drafted as to its table of uses? Or are you asking?
No, I'm asking Bob a question. I'm asking Bob about, in terms of your interpretation, does that play into your interpretation, or is that not relevant?
The difference between warehousing and, trans-terminal work, okay, is defined either in the definitions in Chapter 2 of the zoning bylaws or in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Those are your two places where you can find the difference between the two.
Okay.
And
so when you made
how many doors are mounted on a particular building is completely irrelevant to either determination.
Got it. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so we have a couple things here. First, number one, Millie, to your point,
Madam Chair,
just received
Madam Chair, is the applicant going to have an opportunity to address any of these points at any time?
Oh, sure. Of course, sure. Does anybody have anything to add, Israel or Dave or Rob?
I do.
Sure.
So I have my notes. I'm not going to try to answer every assertion or statement of the folks, and appreciate their energy and their passion. One of the comments made was did resonate with me, and that's that it's important that this applicant be charged, and I would suggest this board also be charged with following the appropriate process and procedures that are followed in accordance with the way that these things are done under your bylaw and done in the town of Northborough. And I think that's important, and really is the purpose of the letter we sent to you this week. This is a groundwater matter. It is not a warehouse matter. The warehouse use in the zone is a use permitted as of right. It would be subject to site plan approval if it were not in the groundwater zone, because it triggers other requirements of site plan approval. As a groundwater matter, there is a process and procedure that's been followed on 5 separate applications of this applicant on Bartlett Street alone, and on other applications on Lyman Street and other properties they have in the town of Northborough. And that process is important to the assertion that you don't, as a board, have supporting information. All of those applications and all of similar applications have been submitted through the Groundwater Advisory Committee. And so to suggest that that board has, or that committee has no basis for making determination, I suggest ignores the fact of their expertise and experience gathered by looking at innumerable numbers of application. Even more telling, what it ignores completely is the support you have from your town staff, who for any number of years have been reviewing applications in the Groundwater Advisory District, have been working with previous planning boards to fine tune the bylaw to better protect the groundwater districts, and has built a proficiency and a knowledge base as to the conditions of the groundwater and the conditions that need to go forward here. And the suggestions that you are somehow working in the blind simply ignores the expertise that you have with town staff that you should be thankful for. This is a groundwater matter, and that needs to be the focus. It is the applicant's position that it is not a traffic matter, that the use is permitted as of right, and the limited review of traffic that's available to you under the guidelines relates to the site plan approval and whether there's ways to improve access for pedestrians, vehicles, or bicyclists on the site or egressing from it. It is not a review of whether there's too much traffic on Bartlett Street. This is not a public referendum as to whether there needs to be another warehouse. No different than the developers who owned the raw or acquired the raw property that makes up Hemlock Street, Jenkins Road, Stirrup Brook, all of which were fine properties that were wooded and protected and were certainly a concern when they were going to be built. There is disruption anytime a property owner intends to use their property in a fashion that's allowed. And so I think it's important to focus on the precedent that's been established in the groundwater district, in the industrial zone, and look at all of those matters and take solace from the conditions of approval that previous planning boards have implemented for similar projects that have adequately protected the town through the review process and the conditions of approval for those developments that have been met. We're glad to focus on the groundwater issues. We're glad to focus on the site plan approval issues, but not to make this a referendum as to whether the property can be used for an as-of-right use.
Okay, so just to clarify, because now I'm confused, I thought in the beginning of this, we agreed that this is a special permit with site plan approval as in
So
your
I
application
now-
and as directed by town staff.
And I now understand your
You changed
confusion.
your mind?
I didn't change my mind.
I'm not confused. This is on your application. Excuse me. I'm not confused. This is on your application that you're asking for a special permit with site plan approval, which we agreed upon. And I'm not done. I also want to say to you that regardless of the criteria, whether groundwater or any other special permit, neither the Zoning Enabling Act nor town zoning provides the absolute right to a special permit. It's a discretionary permit. So what you're saying, I take your point. I understand what you're saying, but we just started this meeting agreeing with what's on your application. If we have a problem with that, then we need to bring in our town council because we're having a fundamental disagreement then.
May I?
Please.
Thank you. Bringing in town council might not be a bad idea. Because now I am, if I could finish, now I understand the point of confusion. So let me try to walk you through our version of it, and you can refer to town council.
I want to stop you right there. I'll have this discussion with you when we have town council. I'm looking at your application that we both agreed on what special permits are required as part of it. If there is a continued debate on that, then I think we need town council because now we're having a debate over special permits that are on your application. If you need to submit your application with under a different basis, then we need to discuss that too. But I'm not going to use board time discussing how you think this should run without the advice of our town council. So I'm gonna stop that there. I think that I personally think we're missing some items.
You're not going to let me finish my presentation for the applicant?
It didn't sound like a presentation. It sounded like an argument over the application. Do you have additional points that are not related to your argument over what you've included in your application?
Well, what's in the application, Madam Chair, relates to the substance of the groundwater special permits that are sought for the groundwater. And we are focused on that. And if there is information that the board feels is lacking as to that information, then we need to hear what it is so we can fulfill that obligation to you, or obtain it from other sources you have, such as the resources you have of town staff. But
Okay, well, board members, what would you like to hear for additional information? I think we heard some of it. We just heard a majority of the board just asked about a peer review. We had questions about the accuracy of the traffic report and general inability to have been able to review it since it was just received yesterday afternoon. We want some information from the fire chief regarding the lack of access to all 4 sides of the building. I have yet to see the 8M permit or application. Is there any other information that the board would like to request?
No, I would just agree to those points.
I can't think there was anything.
So I think as it relates to traffic, I think we need more time, obviously, to digest that. It was handed to us yesterday afternoon. So I think we, at number 1, need time for that. I'd like to request town council join us either at the next meeting or in some sort of conversation prior to this meeting, so that we can get past what the application is for or not, which is surprising to me that we're talking about in August, but in any case, and if the fire chief could actually do it, send us another letter or have a conversation with us to explain why the current access set is adequate from his perspective. I think that fire safety is obviously part of site plan review. We have several different impact analysis components that are part of site plan review, regardless of a special permit, that include environmental, traffic, fiscal, community impact. So that's in the rules and regulations. I'd like to take a look at that with town council as well. Either way, I don't think we have the ability to make a decision this evening unless any board member feels otherwise. Is there any board member that feels like you have enough information to make a intelligent, thoughtful, due diligence driven decision?
I do not.
I do not.
Okay, does that give the applicants a place to start in terms of the additional information? Oh, Kathy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Carrie, I just want to clarify, and maybe this is what you were about to do, is what the request is for town council.
Well, we're having obviously a fundamental issue over what this application entails and the criteria under which we can apply. I'm reading the application that they are applying for a special permit site plan approval, which when I look at my rules and regulations and the bylaws, the criteria reference is the special permit criteria, which includes, as the attorney who joined us earlier on the call, I'm sorry, from Benjamin Tymon, also indicated as part of the criteria with noise, impact on neighborhood, things in our normal general requirements.
Okay.
So I'd like to know. Okay.
No, I was just going to say, so basically I didn't mean to cut you off, but basically the questions to town council, does a special permit criteria apply? And also the other sections of the site plan review as far as the various impact reports.
Yes, and what I would like is, I don't know if that's done in a public meeting or if that's a discussion that I can have with him. I don't want a back and forth forwarded email where I can't have a discussion. I'd like to be able to have a conversation. I don't know if that's with the whole board or if it's appropriate if I have a discussion, either way.
Well, I mean, what I was thinking was that you wanted him to come to the next meeting.
If that's possible, sure. If he could meet with us maybe in advance and we could have a discussion.
Well, because you're in the middle of a public hearing, you need to do any discussion about a project. You need to do it as part of the public hearing process.
Okay, that's fine, sure.
Okay.
Outside of that, though, I would actually like to have a discussion with town council because I think this is coming up in a couple of our applications. I'd like to talk to town council about application of our bylaws as it relates to special permit in general. So I don't know if that's part of a public meeting or if that's something that I can have a discussion with town council. I think we're at a critical point where we need to get everybody on the same page.
If I might, what I have on our list that you would like is a copy of the 8M permit and the application for it and the plan referred to it. You want us to reach out again to the fire chief and request that he send a letter referring to the current site plan date. Correct?
So that's a good question. I don't know if that belongs with, Kathy, is that something that we just be able to invite the fire chief to just talk to us about? You know, I just want to explicitly get the information that he's okay with we're not having that access based on the current site plan. So is that something that, is it appropriate that we reach out or the applicant reaches out? What's the best approach?
Well, I actually think it's appropriate that both parties reach out. You know, the applicant or any applicant, you know, typically contacts the police department, the fire chief. It's usually they have a meeting with the fire chief to go over their plans. So that's completely appropriate for the applicant to do that. But also just as staff, you know, I can follow up with the police and the fire department, you know, based on tonight's meeting.
Okay, that would be great. So yep, so we have that. I think in terms of the traffic, I guess I'd want a little bit more understanding, and maybe that could be part of, maybe that's a presentation, or if appropriate for Rob to handle, just in terms of, you know, some of the, I personally view discrepancies in the traffic study. I have some questions about, I still have some questions about some of the validity of, you know, the one day snapshot that really doesn't match what, you know, I realize that this isn't part of a study where you go around and survey people, but clearly what's in the study doesn't match with the real life experience by the people who live here. So I just want to maybe understand your perspective of how that reconciles. So maybe there's an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about the traffic and point out to us the best and worst case scenarios and just the different ranges as it relates, as you added those buildings. I just want to understand true best and worst case scenarios that this traffic implies, and any sort of the discrepancies that we've seen or has come to fruition tonight in terms of, you know, how do, with 33 bays and 150 employees, how do we only add 30 cars, that kind of thing. Okay, some of the other things I think I think we need some council advisement on. I didn't have, let's see, the fire chief. Again, I guess I would.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to make a suggestion to try to move things along a little bit because time is important to the applicant. And that relates to the concept of wanting peer review on the groundwater issues. We've been clear, we don't think you need it. It has not been requested in any other application this applicant's done over the past 17 years in Northborough. In my experience in working with Northborough, that goes back more now than 30 years, I only can think of one project that had peer review, and that was for traffic for Northborough Crossing. But if it's going to get it done, what I would like to do is ask perhaps Kathy and Fred, because of their expertise in who works in the field and is proficient, to identify one or two firms that they would be comfortable would be doing quality work. And we'll submit either directly or through the 44G account, the payment for them, to review our information and provide a letter as to whether their opinion as to whether our plan meets the standards for the special permit as enunciated in the Groundwater Protection Overlay District. If you're gonna need it, let's just get it done. We're very confident of the work, and have no concerns doing it. But what we can't have is a process that takes 3 or 4 months still to get a consultant on board. We're prepared to live with whoever they choose. There's plenty of people, I'm sure, that we all know who are very good at this information. They see other applications of other engineers in the Groundwater Protection Overlay District, and we'll pay the cost. And you'll have it. I assume we can get that report in 2 weeks.
Can you still hear me okay?
Sure can.
Hold on. Okay, great. Yeah, why don't we plan to your point about ensuring that we are really honed in on our bylaws and the exact things we need to look at. I want to figure out if we do in fact need one, that we're asking for the right things and it's the appropriate direction and all of that. So I do appreciate that statement. I think I would like to speak further with council before we make a decision on that. There's no need to do the work if it's not necessary, and likewise, we need to be prepared to ask the right and appropriate questions. Unless any board member feels differently at this time. And that's certainly open up for comments or anything.
I would just
I
like
can't
to
make the
make
decision alone, so.
I would also just like
I'm just
to,
having a little, let me switch my audio. Sorry, I'm just having a little trouble hearing. I'm gonna switch over. Okay, I'm gonna hang up and try to switch.
okay,
can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I just would like to get a little more clarification and perhaps some more guidance in terms of what specifically within the traffic report we'd like to see. I sort of feel like we provided the traffic report, we gave, which was reviewed by the town engineer. The town engineer made no specific requests or additional comments beyond what we've submitted. We understand that the board has questions about it, and we've discussed what some of those questions are. And we made a good faith effort since the last hearing to incorporate some of the concerns and comments that were raised at the last hearing into the updated report. And as we sit here at this hearing again today, there are continued questions and comments, and I feel like I'd really like to be very clear and specific as to what issues within the traffic report are either being questioned for validity or accuracy, or what else we need to include in the peer review. Because obviously VHB is a very reputable firm. This isn't their first rodeo. The type of traffic report and the information that we were provided in this traffic report is consistent with any number of traffic reports that have been provided to previous planning boards, not only in Northborough, but in other communities. And so, we feel like we've provided very standard information and have gone sort of above and beyond what we believe is required in the bylaw to address these questions. So I guess what I don't want to happen, what I hope would not happen, is that we're sitting at the next hearing, again, sort of feeling like we're not really addressing the questions that were raised. So that's with respect to traffic. There's some very clear requests that have been made with respect to fire access, and we can respond to those. But with traffic, I still feel like it's very nebulous in terms of what we're actually being requested to do and how it actually fits within the norms of what's within a normal traffic report.
Sure. So I would answer to that. We received the report yesterday afternoon. I think it's about, it's well over 100 pages. I don't know, I can't remember the exact amount.
The traffic report is only about, the text is maybe 5 pages or 4.
Oh, okay, I don't know. I'm looking, when I opened it up, it was X number of pages and it was extensive and long and the data was long. So we got that yesterday afternoon and I didn't receive any information from town staff on top of that. Fred, I'm sorry, if you submitted a letter regarding the traffic report, I missed it. Is there a letter from staff on their recommendations based on yesterday afternoon's traffic report update?
No, I did not submit a report based on yesterday's traffic submission.
Okay, so right now I'm looking at 100 and some odd page report of which nobody's given me a top level analysis from staff. So how am I to make sense of this data is my question, and why I would want some sort of review of that. And maybe that's for VHB, I don't know, but what I'm looking for and what I specified last time was I wanted to see, or the board wanted to see rather, those empty warehouses added, which they were added. But what I'm looking for is I need someone to synthesize the data. I need someone to give me best and worst case scenarios in ranges as it relates to the tenants in the buildings, whether the warehouses are empty and full. When I see numbers, I'm not questioning the abilities of VHB or their credibility or anything like that, but it's not lining up to what I'm hearing in that area. And I just want to make sure that someone can give me some sort of top level on top of this, some sort of synthesize the data for me. And on top of that, I still have concerns, as I expressed last time. This is a snapshot in time from October 16th, 2019, that you retrofitted some additional data into, but I don't know, it's August 2020. So at what point is that data old? And maybe it's not old in the world of traffic reports, but I need someone to synthesize that information for me. And I can't be expected to read the report Monday afternoon and come to you on a planning board hearing on Tuesday and not have that information and give you a decision on this plan. That's my current standing on that.
And I appreciate that. And the only thing that I would say in response is that it's not just that you haven't had time to digest the information, which I can appreciate, but we're talking about, and some of the board members are requesting a peer review, which is a separate issue. And I guess what I'm curious about is what are the issues within the current report that you're concerned that are not accurate or warrant the peer review, which is a separate matter. But with respect to the groundwater, we also provided a memo which attempted to highlight for you what the groundwater criteria are for the special permit, and outlined in that memo how the project meets those special permit criteria. We're talking about, and people have suggested peer review for environmental impacts and those things. And I guess what I'd like to understand is, and what I don't understand is why we're not talking about the special permit criteria outlined in your bylaws and how our project meets those criteria. And how, and I guess, and more to the point, what is it that's raising concern and alarm with respect to this project and it's meeting those criteria, where a project that just got approved, the soccer field that got approved a couple of weeks ago, which is also in groundwater 1, there was no discussion about a special permit review for that project or any of the other projects that have been approved in town within that groundwater 1. Or groundwater 3.
That's not groundwater 1.
Groundwater 3, excuse me, groundwater 3. The same exact groundwater overlay district that this project is in, with the exception of the 13 feet.
Well, this is also on, it's very sensitive. I listened to all the conservation meetings too. It's even though it's one of your smallest warehouses, it's on the most sensitive site, which is probably why it's the last one developed. You're on the river. 30 acres out of the 60 were wetlands. And there was a lot of talk at the conservation meeting. And we just want to make sure that 20 years down the road, we don't say, who was the planning board that approved that? And it was never double checked with the peer review to make sure that 227-page stormwater report is covering all the bases and that the systems set up really work. I guess that's where I stand. I just, I don't want to look back and say, well, because when I listen to conservation too, that one of the last meetings, even Mia, who's on the staff, said, I wouldn't mind a second voice. I wouldn't mind a second look at this. This is a very sensitive area. And I think it can have a lot of environmental impact. That's why I'd want the peer review.
I think it's just, oh, sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
And so I just wanted to comment, Israel, we have 35 residents on with us. And when I was listening, I think it was, you were seeing as far as traffic through the traffic engineering firm that you hired was much different than what they were seeing. And so sometimes if you're on a planning board and you have that many people coming out saying, the reality is it doesn't make sense, the numbers that you're getting for what's projected is not unusual for the board to have a request for a peer review to check into it and see how the growth is going to impact the neighborhood. So I think the fact that you had so many people speak out against the traffic and mention that the traffic was an issue, numbers weren't adding up, gives cause to the board there should be a peer study.
Well, if the board, if I may, and I will offer it to the board, we would work with town staff to identify an appropriate peer reviewer for the traffic. We're pretty confident that the information that we provided is good and based on the standards of the Highway and Traffic Safety Institute, and so we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
Doesn't the peer review have to go up for RFP, RFQ? Like, I don't think you can just pick somebody.
No, and plus it's the planning board who selects.
Right, we're not suggesting that we would pick the peer reviewer. We're simply suggesting that we work with town staff who would presumably work with members of the board to identify an appropriate peer reviewer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in lieu of being able to synthesize the data that you've sent to us, I mean, I don't know if you even want to present anything, if you want VHB to present anything, some sort of analysis of what came yesterday, or if you want staff to take an initial look, or, I mean, it's almost, you're asking us, we got this very last minute and there's been no presentation of it. So, I mean, I obviously the board is open to that, but what I don't want to do is, add too many things here. I want to make sure that first of all, again, I would like to speak to council, but I want to make sure we're asking for the appropriate things and to make sure we do keep this on track and in the right spirit of the bylaws. So I don't necessarily, I think we have to come back to this meeting anyway. I don't know if that's a decision we want to make tonight to then force all these additional things that I don't know if we can sort through certain things versus others. I think it's worth taking a closer look at that. I don't know how the board feels about, at this point where we don't have enough information to decide tonight. We have some things that we need to reconcile in advance. I mean, if the fire chief comes back and says that is a problem, then we have issues to solve beyond the traffic. So I don't know, does it make sense to prioritize that a little bit?
If I might, but sorry.
Amy, did you have a comment?
How we got to this point at the very end stage is there were a lot of discussions between staff and the fire chief, the police chief, but we never got the full details. We just got the fire chief approved it, and I think maybe that's where some of the disconnect is, where we've been left out on a lot of the details. Like the applicant has probably worked with town staff since 2000 when they bought this property And even online with Gutierrez, I said there's a master plan with this whole industrial district. They probably know the future, the past, but we're left in the dark. And then it goes through all these boards and it's supposed to be, okay, planning board, you've got 2 meetings to approve this now. And although some of these things may seem repeat to you, a lot of it was the first time we were hearing it.
That's a good point. Okay, so why don't we, I'm sorry, Mark, did you have something to add?
Well, I think to follow up with what Israel's saying is, what I don't think is fair at this point, without belaboring timelines or anything else, is that if the will of the board is that it's going to want to have some third-party review on issues relating to groundwater and some third-party to review to verify some of the information provided by VHB, such as Rob's statement that it is industry practice to count on one day and use counters for other information and extrapolate it, then Israel's already indicated the applicant's glad to work to identify with town staff, and with all due respect, I think town staff of anybody on this call are the best people to identify who's qualified to do that, having seen the work of firms over any number of years. And let's get them the information and at least start feeding them the information so they can review it and make some real progress. If we don't do that now, and we're back here in September talking about peer review, which is what you talked about in July, we didn't get anywhere. And that's not fair to the applicant. That's process and procedure. If you're gonna need it, we don't agree with it, but we'll concede, we'll get somebody involved. And I think that it can happen in an expedited way. I can tell you that that happens in any number of other communities. They have people that they use on a regular basis for peer review. You can think about making a part of your process and procedures under your rules and regulations for certain cases, but that's a different discussion. But we'd ask at least that you direct staff to work to identify somebody that we can feed information to before the board meets again.
Okay, but I just want to clarify, of course, staff is a part of the process, but it is the planning board that selects the peer reviewer as part of our rules and regulations. So it's not just, yeah.
I don't know what that means as to what I just said, though. I'm trying to make some progress.
We might be saying the same thing.
Over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Okay.
Okay, so is the board comfortable? Are we at a spot where we would like to request that, and we will at least push that forward in addition to the other items that we are requesting, and be able to come back here in our September meeting? Amy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. Are we gonna at least be able to question or interview the peer reviewer? Because then if staff picks it with the applicant, if the applicant's picking the peer reviewer, then it's someone, a lot of times with the questions is, do you have a conflict of interest? Have you worked with if it's someone who works with Gutierrez all the time, then how do we know we're getting an independent peer review?
With all due respect.
Yeah.
Okay. Gutierrez has been working in this town for more than 20 years. We're not going to pick somebody. We're not going to allow anybody to pick somebody that's working on a present job for Gutierrez. Okay. There's no chicanery going on. You'll be able, I would assume that you would want the peer reviewer to participate in a future planning board meeting, and you can ask them any question you want to ask them. I'm not trying to control the information. I'm looking to get this process moving.
Okay, I guess I heard wrong. What I heard is that you wanted to pick the
I was very clear.
Okay.
I was very clear that town staff would pick.
But the town staff does not pick, the planning board picks. Town staff has input and they help, but the town staff is not charged with picking the peer review consultant, just to be clear. That's what I'm saying back to you there.
Well, if we bring that to where we are right now, if what you're indicating is until the board meets again, a peer reviewer cannot be selected, then with all due respect, just say it. Then the town staff has nothing to do. If the board's willing to defer to a selection made by town staff of peer review, at least the process can begin this week in a selection, in engagement, and the sharing of information to those people with a set schedule to produce reports to you.
No, so then what would happen is it would be a part of our meeting. We wouldn't do that over the next week and do something behind the scenes. It needs to be part of our public, the planning board would set the terms, what the things we want to know, talk about what we expect from a consultant, and agree to that before we move forward. It wouldn't happen before the next time we meet. So we'll have to reconcile that somehow, but that is how the process works.
I'm sorry, so the board could not, prior to the next hearing, request a slate of candidates, engineering firms from staff or from anywhere that it wishes to choose from.
So we
And-
issue an RFP. We need to put it out there for multiple people, and we haven't really talked about the RFP, so we can't talk about that outside of a public, this is all part of the public hearing right now. So we can't meet behind the scenes or talk behind the scenes about items related to this public hearing. So ideally, that would be great if we could just decide on what that RFP entails, well, while the next few weeks run, but we are obligated to open meeting law to conduct our business in a public setting. Because for all the abutters on the line, that's not fair to them to not have any insight into the process or what happened. They obviously are represented by legal counsel right now themselves. So I want to be sure that whatever we do is in the public eye, appropriate to open meeting law. Oh, actually, hold on. Benjamin Tymon, I'm going to allow you to talk here. I see you have your hand up. Did you mean to put your hand up?
I did, Madam Chair. I just thought I might add a point that's relating to the discussion on potential scoping of a peer review RFP and the like. You raised this, Madam Chair, earlier with respect to the traffic report and wanting to see some analysis of a range of different uses. I wanted to just make the point that I'm not sure whether other warehouse projects have been approved in the past where the use and the tenant has been unknown, but it seems to me it's going to be awfully difficult for a special permit decision to be made without knowing that. So for example, how can the board determine whether the use is developed will or won't adversely affect the neighborhood, and how will it determine whether or not there'll be a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians? So, on issues of odor, noise, etc. The applicant earlier, I think, said that those things might be taken care of as part of an occupancy permit process. I've not ever heard of an occupancy permit hearing, really of any kind, actually. But certainly not one that goes in depth on the kinds of issues that should be decided at the special permit stage. So I'd ask the board to consider, both in its requests to the consultants and what they're providing for potentially supplemental analysis on traffic and other things, and also in the peer review paradigm that hopefully will be formed, that there be consideration of potential uses, because otherwise I think it's difficult for those criteria to be analyzed in any kind of meaningful way.
Okay, great. Thank you, Benjamin. Okay, so we are to a point where we need to move this forward. We have another hearing, which actually is the subdivision hearing coming up. So I want to make sure we leave time for that. We actually need to close at about 9:30. So I want to make sure we have some next steps. We've outlined some things that we want. Obviously, this hearing needs to be continued. If the applicant wants to move forward with the peer review process, that's something I think maybe Kathy, are there any ways we could expedite, things that we could, maybe sometimes in the past we've just sent documents to you or things to you and you've been able to kind of keep track versus us trying to talk, obviously we can't talk to each other outside of a public hearing. So, is there any way that you recommend that we could expedite some of this?
One of the things that that we can do as staff is put together the RFQ, because it would be a request for qualifications, not a request for proposals. So it would be an RFQ, and there's very standard language for peer review, and it's done. It's written to be more general than specific, so that it covers anything versus, limiting it to just, A, B, and C. So I could put together, a draft RFQ and send that out to the board so that you have that in advance of the next meeting.
Okay, that would be great. Does the board agree that that would be helpful to kind of help expedite a little bit?
Sure. Yep, sounds good.
Absolutely.
We can also, again, provided each one of our backgrounds, can put together, several engineering firms that have, multiple disciplines within their firm, and provide those to the board in advance of the meeting also.
Okay, that would be great. So I think those are some good solutions to kind of help move this forward. Let's see. So why don't we we'll take a look at that. The planning board will take a look at that. We have the things that we mentioned before of what's outstanding. Where is the applicant providing the 8M permit and application? Or is that something we need to, does conservation send that to us? Kathy, what's the
No,
best way to
We'll
get?
provide it.
Okay, thank you.
We can provide it. Is there anything in specific that you'd like to understand about the 8M permit? Maybe that we can help you, maybe summarize it for you. It's basically a permit, a simple permit. So I just asked the question so that we can facilitate your review of it. Or are you just trying to confirm that we have it?
I just have been asking for a couple of meetings to see it and I never get it. So I just want to see it and just see what it entails and what it encompasses, what the application asks for.
And with all due respect, the relevance to the site plan approval, I'm just trying to understand that.
Well, you listed it on your permits that you received related to this project. So as listed in your document to me, it's included and I've never seen it. So I'm curious to see a document that you've submitted as part of your application. Is there a reason I can't see it? I mean, I've asked a couple
There's
times.
absolutely no reason that you can't see it. It's just for that matter, there are any number of other permits that we.
I mean,
can
is it not
provide.
as simple as just forwarding it to me? It seems like this is a
Sure.
long, convoluted process. Okay, I just want to see it. So it's as simple as that.
Could you actually just forward every one you have on the list? You have the MIPA approval. There's a whole list of approvals.
Some of it might be on, some of it is online, I think.
I looked through them today too. And I didn't see the MIPA one.
Okay. All right, great. So what we need to, our next planning board meeting is, let's see. Is it September 1st? Is that our next one?
Yes, September 1st.
Okay, so would we want to regroup September 1st or do we need, I guess I don't want to belabor it. So can we plan on September 1st at 6 o'clock? Does that work for the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion from the board to continue hold on, everybody. I've officially lost my agenda now. Is there a motion from the board to continue the special permit site plan approval, groundwater protection overlay special permit to September 1st at 6 p.m.?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? I'll do a roll call. Millie?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And carries an aye. Okay, so the hearing will be continued to September 1st at 6 p.m. Next on the agenda, is everybody here the same group that is participating in the preliminary subdivision?
We are, Madam Chair. On behalf of the applicant, we would request that the matter be continued We just received Mr. Litchfield's letter, and given the hour and the efforts toward the previous application, there's no particular urgency to act on this. We'll grant an extension of the time for the board to act by correspondence to Ms. Joubert tomorrow.
Okay, so do we need to set a specific date and time to continue? Is this something where you would need more time than the next time we meet?
If you know when you're meeting after that, then we can certainly put it on for that meeting. There'll be enough to do in 2 weeks other than this. And as I said, candidly, there's no particular urgency for a preliminary subdivision plan, given what's involved, so.
Okay, so Kathy, our next one is September 15th.
Yes. Yep. And you just have one, well, not just, but you have 425 Whitney Street scheduled for 6 o'clock on September 15th.
Okay.
So far, that's what's on your agenda.
I might suggest, Madam Chair, that if you continue the preliminary subdivision to September 1st, we'll be together anyways. If the evening ends up being shorter, maybe we can cover it. If not, then we can look at continuing after that.
Okay, that's a good idea. Is there, and everybody on the team can make it, but the Bartlett team can make September, obviously we just clarified that for the first one, so I assume we can. So is there a motion to continue the preliminary subdivision for 0 Bartlett Street to 6 p.m. on September 1st?
Carrie, just before you do that motion,
Yeah.
Although I certainly trust Mr. Donahue for the extension, but can we just have that stated for the record? Because with a preliminary subdivision plan, the board through Massachusetts general law has 45 days within which to from the day that it's submitted, you have 45 days to hold this informal meeting and then to issue a decision if you so choose. A planning board does not have to issue a decision on a preliminary subdivision plan. But if you didn't issue a decision within 45 days, it's basically deemed approved, which again doesn't carry any sort of significant weight because it needs to be followed by a definitive subdivision plan. But if the applicant could just, state something to that effect for the record, that they are not only, in agreement to continuing the public hearing to September 1st, but also granting the board, an extension of the 45-day time frame.
Through you, Madam Chair, for the record, let me state that the applicant, with regard to the preliminary site plan, will confirm tomorrow in writing that we are extending the date for the planning board to act with regard to the preliminary subdivision plan to Friday, September 18th.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, why Friday, September? Was that just, you just picked a day that's past beyond the meeting? Is that what we're doing?
It's a written decision you have to make, and so there's
Oh, I got you. Thank you.
creating some lag time between whenever we finally deal with it. And
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, just making an assumption, Carrie, that say if, you did hear the subdivision on September 1st, possibly continue it to the 15th, maybe not. But if you decided on September 1st, I would then draft a decision, you'd review it on the 15th, and then, so I mean, that time frame works.
Okay, no problem. Do you need that in writing or no?
He's going to, Mr. Donahue is going to provide it in writing. But I just wanted it stated for the record tonight, so that what he just stated works.
Okay, great. Okay, so with that, is there a motion to continue the preliminary subdivision for 0 Bartlett Street?
I make a motion to continue the preliminary hearing for 0 Bartlett Street to.
I'm sorry, Millie, I may have stated that wrong. I jumbled my words. I meant for the preliminary subdivision for 0 Bartlett Street would be the motion.
I make a motion to continue the preliminary subdivision for 0 Bartlett Street to September 1st.
At
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? I'll do a roll call. Millie?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Michelle? Michelle, that was an aye. You cut out for a second.
Yeah, I,
Okay, great. And Kara's an aye, so that is unanimous. So we are continued for that. Okay, great. I'm gonna move you guys out of the hot seat here. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. I make sure we have the board here. Okay, we got everybody. Great. Okay, what I want to make sure we cover tonight is actually the decision for 400 Cedar Hill. Kathy, we have that on the agenda, right?
Yeah, well, it's not, no, it's not specifically listed on the agenda, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, you've already, you know, closed the public hearing, voted as far as, you know, what the conditions you wanted in the decision. And then as part of the public record, you know, I said that I would draft the decision and then, you know, provide it to you. So you're not introducing any new information. You can't introduce any new information. So it's just a matter of reviewing the decision.
Okay, so why don't we do that so that we can take care of that? I assume 400 Cedar Hill is waiting for that. So let's get that taken care of this evening. Were there any comments or anything that we missed from the decision or anything from the board? Anthony, did you have anything?
I did not.
Michelle?
I did not.
Okay, Amy, did you have anything?
I did
Oh,
not.
I can't hear you. Oh, Millie does not. So Amy, you're on mute. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me? I can't see myself anymore, or I did do the all day, but I did send Kathy a couple things, so I'm just trying to open it in my email. I have to try to open the town email from my phone. And there were things that we might not even need.
Amy, if I can, I mean, certainly open your email, but you had two comments
Yep.
about whether or not, and I wasn't specifically sure what you meant because groundwater is referenced in here, but you asked if the Conservation Commission decision should be referenced in the decision, and also the Groundwater Committee's decision.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know if you had to mention that they were both, it was approved by them.
No, the short answer is no. Conservation Commission is, you know, a completely separate board that runs under a different state statute, and, you know, their decision stands alone, you know, as opposed, I mean, as any other board's decision stands alone. And then as far as groundwater, the part of what you granted in here is a special permit for the groundwater.
Okay, I just didn't know if you had to finding of fact that the groundwater committee approved it, because sometimes it has a finding of fact that the design review committee approved it, but if we don't need it, we don't need it, that's fine. And actually, while we're on this topic, I just have one quick question. How you said the conservation runs alone. I read something today that if a conservation committee has order of conditions, that you have to add it to the site plan. Is that true?
I've never heard that.
Okay. I'd have to find it in my notes, but I just, while I was on the topic, I just figured I'd ask you quickly. All right, so then I'm all set with the decision.
I did not have any changes to it either. So do we have a motion to approve the decision for 400 Cedar Hill? Do we need to state exactly what it was for? It was a...
No, I mean, you really don't even have to make a motion or a vote, Carrie, because you've already taken the vote to issue the decision.
That's right. Yep. Okay. So we just need to come in and sign.
Right. So the only thing, you know, with that, obviously, you know, town hall is still closed to the public. I mean, they did, the selectmen did vote to allow appointments to happen, but we don't need to set up an appointment to do this. So what I can do is, as all 5 of you would need to sign the decision, just give me a call when, you can come by between now and Friday.
Okay.
And, I'll just meet you at the door and you'll sign the decision.
Just a question. I don't know if this is proper procedure or not. Do all planning board members need to sign? I mean, could they delegate one to sign or?
Well, you can do one of 2 things. In the past, it's just sort of depended on the planning board. Sometimes just the chairman has signed the decision, and that's acceptable. A while ago, a couple years ago, maybe, the board asked that all their signatures be on the decision. So that's why it's listed now as all 5 of you. I know with the Conservation Commission, because of COVID, they have granted the conservation agent the ability to sign on their behalf. So she signs their names. But I believe that she had to file something at the Registry of Deeds to do that. So if you want, I can look into that, but that's not going to help us immediately for this.
No, that's okay. I mean, I just want, if you want me to save you the trip and hassle to town hall, I'm happy to do it. But if everyone wants to sign, that's fine too. Does the board have any thoughts on their preference? If you want to sign it, I take no offense.
I just as soon have you sign it for me.
Yeah, I don't need to sign it.
Anyone want to specifically sign it or?
No, is it just for this time or are we changing?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not. No, not for indefinite and unlimited things, just in the term for this one decision.
Oh yeah, sure.
Are you okay if I sign it? Or Michelle, do you want to sign it in person? Oh, I can't hear you. It sounds like you're saying you're okay with it, but
Okay.
yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm okay if you want to sign it.
Okay, so Kathy, is that adequate enough for me to be able to sign it legally?
Yeah,
check all our boxes?
and by that we mean that, Carrie, it's just your name that's going to be on here. You're not signing for everybody
Correct.
else.
I'm not signing for anybody
Yeah.
else. I'm just signing my name
Yep.
the planning board has granted me the authority to sign for the decision. Only for this decision. I have no additional authority to sign on behalf of the board. Well, beyond my normal scope.
Yep. So just give me a call when you want to stop by, Carrie. Not at 8:00 tomorrow morning. Please.
I won't. Okay, great. So also on our agenda, I wanted to talk quickly about the 425 peer review. I'm just going to pull my notes over for that. So I just wanted to discuss where we are to date and hopefully try to reset us and make sure that we're able to accomplish what we need to accomplish and, just maybe have a better stream of communication. So, as I expressed, I sent a message to Kathy and Fred and Scott that I didn't feel necessarily, and I understand the staff is working a million miles a minute and that you're trying to get stuff done, and I'm not suggesting any intentional oversight, but I did not feel included in the evaluation team process at all, and I didn't really receive any information that allowed me to really see what was going on. And it's just something I wanted to talk about to make sure that, maybe our expectations were different going into it. And I just want to account for that and make sure that, we obviously have a couple more peer reviews on the table. So I just want to, if we are to continue on with this RFP, is there a way we can I be a part of it and more proactively or directly? I mean, I don't know, Kathy or Fred, I know Scott's not here, but
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Carrie. I think it was probably just, and again, the board doesn't have the privy of, the emails that the 4 of us have sent, and I mean, that's okay. There's nothing secret about them, but I think that, I think it was just miscommunication because we were under the assumption that just based on a couple emails that you and I had exchanged, that that us reviewing them in-house first was okay, and that we then recommended, who we thought, fulfilled the requirements of the RFQ. So that's, I mean, that's as simple as it is.
Yeah,
So
so just in terms of, going back to it, if there was any, if there was any sort of evaluation forms filled out, I think there's evaluation forms as part of this. I just didn't see any of them. So if they're available, if that's something that could be shared.
no, we didn't do the forms. I mean, literally the three of us, sat in a room with our masks on and, went through the request for qualifications and then went through how each of the firms had responded to that. And we had concluded that only one of them, fulfilled the request. So that's, again, it was very simple, straight, quick process.
Yeah, I just wish I had been conferenced in to that conversation because I really had no insight into how the selection was made or, in terms of, I had mentioned, feeling surprised on the call when we had our interviews that I didn't realize that one firm had not known the other firm, but that they were connected by staff as part of the process, which you've explained is part of the process, but I had no insight into that. So I was under the impression that the two other firms were not qualified because they didn't have that expertise in-house. I just, maybe there was an assumption that I connected that, but I didn't. So I was really surprised when we had our interviews, and I just wish that I had been more part of that. So, going forward, if we could, as we get these peer reviews, if we just, keep the planning board, and I'm sure you've done these without the planning board in the past, which is completely fine. So it's hard to break out of that mindset. And again, I know you're working a million miles a minute.
That's okay. I mean, for 425, how do you want to, go forward with that? Because we had originally talked about, that possibly we would have done the interviews tonight, because of the tropical storm and all of that. But how do you want to move forward with at least 425? Do you, because again, three of the firms that responded did not bring in any expert on, the radiation piece and did not ask us as staff, did we have any recommendations? I mean, clearly we don't have any skin in the game. I mean, we don't know these people because we were very specific in the request for proposal that everybody reviewed that it can't be a firm that's working in town presently. We wanted to separate out, we didn't want to have any conflict of interest. And I think as we had all talked about too, clearly an engineering firm that, typically does peer review is not going to have, this 425 review is very unique as far as the radiation or the sterilization process. So we had just put together, or I had just through Google searches found two different people, and then one of them ultimately said that he had a conflict, or he believed what would be a conflict because he had done work for Steris. He was doing work for Steris, but on another project, in another state. So that's why there was only one firm that, out of who I had just found again through a Google search. And, that person would have been, he called saying that he was interested, but that he himself was not going to, put together an engineering firm. So could he be connected with an engineering firm? And I said, sure, anyone that calls, they can contact you and, you two can figure out whether you want to work together, whether you want to submit a proposal, whatever it is that you want to do. So, that's not anything that we make decisions on. We just sort of connect, people.
Okay, so we didn't evaluate that firm separately. We didn't evaluate them.
No, that would be part of your
anything there.
Yeah, that would be part of your review. Part of your interview process. For all of us, staff included, on what these two, consultants would bring to the table.
Okay.
We can, I mean, just a couple suggestions, Carrie. I mean, you can move forward and still interview the same two people, or you know, I mean, again, I'm sure time is, you know, time is always an issue for the applicants, but I mean, you could, you could either send out the RFQ again. I don't really anticipate that you'd get any different result, because, you know, this is so specific to talk about the sterilization portion of this review that, you know, you're not going to have consultants sort of scanning town websites to say, oh, is anyone looking for a sterilization consultant? You know, so it's really going to be a matter of us trying to, you know, again, Google,
So,
and it always sounds like, oh, let's look it up on Wikipedia, but you know, just trying to find consultants, because it's not anything that the engineering firm is going to do. I mean, it's just not how it works.
Millie, did you have something?
I did, because I guess I thought the last time that we were trying to do this, we just couldn't do it because of a technical issue, but now has something changed? Has somebody backed out?
No, that was true. The last time we had we weren't able to conduct the interview because of that. And just prior to this meeting, and I mean, I didn't want to share, I'm speaking to it now. I didn't know if it would be outside of, I didn't want to forward something if it was not appropriate outside of a public meeting. But I just expressed some concerns that I felt surprised that one was selected to present with an expert. I didn't understand how that happened, and I didn't know about any of it. So there's just a lot of confusion I wanted to clear up on the back end, which is what brought this up. The one thing that Scott mentioned, though, that I think I wanted to clarify is that he had mentioned about conducting meetings, interviews during the public meeting. So I would want to make sure that we're doing that properly. I don't know if, I know you're just getting back from vacation, Kathy, so I don't expect you to have all the answers, but that was something on my radar.
Yes. I mean, I think Scott brought up a good, valid point about that. It's not that there is a law, so to speak, you know, against conducting the interviews at a public meeting, because certainly not so much for peer review, but, you know, when people have interviewed for a position, sometimes those interviews are done in a meeting. Typically, this is with the Board of Selectmen. So, you know, clearly, the first person the person that goes first is at a disadvantage with any interview, whether you're doing it publicly or not. So I think that's that was the point of Scott raising that, was that if you're going to interview multiple firms, you know, the first firm is always at a disadvantage. So again, there's no law or regulation against doing that, but it's just bringing up an awareness, you know, to the board.
Okay. But, you know, obviously we received a letter today from Steris. I read through it quickly, but one thing I was surprised to see is that the statement that the planning board is now concerned, apparently, that it is unable to find a qualified company. I don't know where that was expressed in a public setting where that would be the assumption. I think in general we need to address this letter, not necessarily right now at 9:30, but I think a lot of this was a misrepresentation of our current state of affairs, and certainly I found it alarming that there was a insinuation of personal liability in this application that I was the concluding statement of this message that I think we should probably talk to town council about how to respond to this type of letter at some point. We don't have, I mean, I don't know if any board members have if you got a chance to read through this.
When did that come in?
This morning, I sent it out. Carrie, I think just to clarify, my assumption in reading that letter about the peer reviewer or whatever, and I don't have the letter in front of me, is the people from Steris were on the meeting when you were interviewing, or when you had started to we actually didn't hold the interview, but so I'm assuming that that's where that came from. I mean, that's.
But we didn't meet because there was an audio issue. We didn't declare that there was a problem with finding anybody. So I'm not sure where that notion came from. There's no, does any board member remember from the last hearing us talking about not finding people? Or it seemed to me to be an audio issue with the applicant, the radiation expert. Did anyone think that we suggested that we couldn't find somebody?
No, and I didn't see anything in the minutes that would have said that either.
So I found this letter an interesting stand overall, and I think it's something we should talk with council, and truly any threats of personal lawsuits are just not something that should come to the planning board. So I think we need to, not now, but take a second look at this one.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
Yeah, I think maybe I thought I got this afternoon, but Kathy, you may have sent it this morning. Maybe I just
No, I mean, it came to me this morning, so I mean, I don't remember what time I forwarded it to you, but so I mean, whether it was late morning or this afternoon, I mean, today is when you received it.
Okay, so I don't know if any board members, when you do take the time to it, I think we should talk about some sort of counsel on this letter and how we need to reply at some point. Amy.
Since we have town council, hopefully next meeting, maybe we should talk to them about it.
I mean, is that appropriate, Kathy, or this is outside of the hearing?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to raise, Carrie. You might not be able to do that outside of the public hearing because it really, again, I don't know what I did with my copy of the letter, but because it involves 425 and that's an open public hearing that you have, you might not be able to do that.
Okay.
If you want, I mean, certainly for you to read the letter and so forth, but I mean, for you to discuss the letter and to discuss it with town council, and I can certainly provide the letter to town council. But for you to discuss it, I think you would have to do it in the public hearing.
Sure, that's fine with me. Is that okay? But does the board,
no, that's fine.
I think we need to determine an appropriate response, and one that sort of clarifies what I view to be a misrepresentation of this process and the purpose for our peer review, which I think the planning board has expressed multiple times the purpose, and there seems to be a disconnect on that. Regarding the RFQ, so how do we, so my other concern and I'm sorry, I'm past 9:30. David, can you bear with us for a few more minutes?
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you so much. In this area of Massachusetts, it seems like we have all these, MIT and WPI and all of these high-tech areas. You would think, I mean, I'm sure I'm oversimplifying, but is there a way we can, we found someone that's located in Illinois, and I don't know if during COVID that lends itself to travel and being on site, and think that's what I mentioned in my concerns. Do we need to consider that in our RFQ? Does that matter? Do we need to?
Does that open up opportunities? Is that what you're asking?
No, if it closes it a little bit, because we can't, if part of our requirements in the RFQ is that somebody comes to the site and they live in a state that's not even allowed to come here unless they have a 14-day quarantine, or they're in a high risk group and they can't travel, or they prefer not to and it's a danger to them, do we need to reconfigure anything? And we wrote this pre-COVID, I guess was my comment. And do we need to account for anything different? I don't know if there are other boards facing this that, they've written something pre-COVID and all of a sudden that changes how things are approached.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're looking at me for an answer, I don't know.
Okay, so
so before the next meeting, can we look around and try to find some experts too in the area just to help the process. I don't know. I did a Google search too, and there was a company in Maine, but I didn't reach out to him, and I don't know if he's qualified. I just did a Google search to see if there was anyone else in the area.
I mean, is there anything we can do to expedite or that, I mean, I know staff is so busy. Is there something that, anything to make it so that you're not sitting there doing Google searches, or is there like a planning group we can reach out to? Or
Well, one of the things that I just did last no, I was gone last week, so it was the week before, after the planning board meeting, was the consultant that I had found in North Carolina. I can't remember his name right now, but he was the one who, after he read the RFQ, realizing that it was Steris and that he was presently working for a different branch of Steris or something. I don't recall. But anyways, I reached out to him at the, and I don't know who this person is. I know nothing about him other than finding him online. But I reached out to him and asked him if he had other people that he could recommend. And he sent me, it was either 2 or 3 other names of people. And, he didn't know anything about their availability but these were just other experts in the field. So, I can find out if I can reach out to them, now that because the RFQ process is closed, people were asked to submit by, it was in July at some point. So I can get clarification on that, whether or not we can still reach out to people because the deadline has passed.
Yeah, and is there a precedence where it's something that can be reissued with a new date? Like, was it an arbitrary date? Now I can't recall why we picked it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, arbitrary in the sense that, we had just put together a schedule.
Okay, but there's no like law that you must do it in X period of time, or we picked.
No. So, I mean, if you wanted to reissue it, that is a possibility. But, why don't I find out just through, well, again, Scott does a lot of, procurement. I can discuss it with Scott. Usually the assistant town administrator is our procurement officer, but where we don't have an assistant town administrator right now. But I can, either by, talking to Scott and, or reaching out to town council. I mean, they have a whole, division that just deals with procurement. And ask them, just, what are the parameters that we're working within.
Okay. Any other questions about where we stand in the process? Okay. All right. Well, certainly the goal is to not belabor it, but also to make sure we're doing what we set out to do. So thank you for that. I think we're past our time. Kathy, is there anything that you have on this agenda that must be addressed tonight?
Well, no, not a must, but I had just wanted to, we had minutes, but if you wanted, if you want to do the minutes in September, that's fine. And then meeting dates, but if you want to do that in September, that's fine also.
Okay.
I just wanted to be able to, again, I mean, typically it's, it's always the first and the third Tuesdays. But we have a conflict in November because November 3rd is election day. So you can't meet on election day. And then I have a conflict for the second meeting in December.
Okay, so if we don't have public hearings, because I think one thing we talked about doing is making our meetings so we have one dedicated to hearings and one dedicated to business of the board, like bylaw review or other discussions or things like that. And it's been very hard to get into that groove, especially as we don't want to delay any of these applications coming through. So overall, that's been a challenge. But in the event where we don't have public hearings, can we use the regular Zoom license, not webinar, so that, it doesn't matter if obviously we're having a public meeting, but it doesn't need to facilitate a public hearing.
Yes, you can, if you don't have any public hearings, you can use the regular license.
Okay, and would that open up options to have 2 board meetings each month?
Well, I mean, you're dedicated for the first and the third Monday. Excuse me, the first and the third Tuesdays. But we also have, staff that has to work these meetings. So, it's dependent, if you go off your schedule, it's dependent on their schedule also. But, Mondays, every Monday is already booked, at least with the webinars. So that means that there's only 2 staff people that are doing these meetings. So they have those meetings. And then every Tuesday is booked with meetings. So, if you were looking at a different night, or again, just sticking to your first and your third Tuesday, and, if you don't want to do it as a webinar and you don't have any public hearings, you can just do it as a regular license, but you can't take any public input.
Okay, well, is it okay if we just settle on it next month in the
Yep.
in the name of time? And I don't want to keep David too long. Okay, so why don't we hold our minutes then? And for 56 Hudson Street, a ZBA application, is that a site plan review?
Yeah, none of these, yes, it is, but none of these are, the way I listed them here, it's just again, months or a year ago, you had requested just to have what's going on before the ZBA. So specifically, if you want to do a site plan review with any of these applicants, we need to schedule it, as an agenda item. But on 56 Hudson Street, their application isn't complete. So we have not, even though they automatically, when someone files by the deadline, we schedule the public hearing for the next month. They still have to meet with, design review. They still have to meet with groundwater. And this applicant, we have not moved them forward to do either one of those. So they are on the agenda for the ZBA next week, but the recommendation from staff, of course, is going to be that hearing needs to be continued because they haven't met with any of the, advisory boards, nor have they supplied, the town with all the information that's required with their application.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that we need to cover from our agenda?
No, not for me. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, anything else from your perspective you want to cover? Are we okay to pass on the minutes till next month?
Yeah.
Melanie, if you can hear me, thank you for your job on the minutes. You're faster. You work faster than we can approve them. So thank you for that effort. Okay, is there a motion then to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, Millie?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And Carrie is an aye. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good
Thank
night.
Night.